Hi everyone, welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. Now we're going to talk about Kim Ki-on-hee, the woman who once was the First Lady of South Korea. She is one of the most controversial figures in South Korean political history, the wife of President Yoon Suk-yeol, who was arrested on January 15, 2025, becoming the first president to be detained in the country's history. Additionally, she is known for numerous allegations regarding her education and business dealings. Yet, she is also a strong and influential woman. Kim Ki-on-hee was born in 1972 in Yangpyeong, Gyeonggi-do. She is the third of 4 children in a working-class family in Seoul. Her father was a civil servant, and her mother ran a clothing store. She graduated from Seoul National University and earned a doctorate in law from Gyeonggi University. She met Yoon Suk-yeol in 2006. They married in 2012. By 2022, Yoon Suk-yeol was elected president of South Korea, and Kim Ki-on-hee officially became the First Lady. Since becoming the First Lady, Kim Ki-on-hee quickly became an influential figure in the government, with many accusing her of using her position to benefit her family and friends. However, Kim Ki-on-hee has denied these allegations, but her scandals have damaged the image of the Yoon Suk-yeol government. She has also been criticized for her lavish lifestyle and controversial statements. Despite numerous controversies, Kim Ki-on-hee remains a significant figure in South Korean politics. She is a strong supporter of her husband's policies and has used her position to promote social initiatives. Many say Kim Ki-on-hee is a complex and interesting character, and this is quite evident in her life. In February 1991, at the age of 19, Kim Ki-on-hee graduated from Mayeonjul Girls High School in Gangdong-gu, Seoul. A year later, she enrolled in the Art and Sports Academy of Gyeonggi University, majoring in Western painting. And since starting her studies in art, her resume has become very impressive. First, in May 1995, she began to attract attention with an award-winning piece at the Korea Art Competition. Then, she attended Sukmyeong Women's University to obtain a master's degree in art education. In 1998, she became an art teacher at a high school in Seoul. After a few years of juggling work and study, she won a major award at the Seoul International Animation Festival, then went to Kookmin University to earn a doctorate in digital content design. After graduating successfully, she changed her name from Kim Myung-shin to Kim Ki-on-hee and continued to build her reputation in the field of art and design. Many universities began inviting her as a part-time lecturer, mainly teaching design courses. Simultaneously, she founded her own company, organizing renowned art exhibitions abroad, gradually becoming a prominent figure in South Korea's cultural and artistic scene. Her early career success did not stop her from pursuing further personal development. In 2012, she continued her studies with an MBA at Seoul National University, parallel to her academic career, which gave Kim Ki-on-hee an impressive resume before becoming First Lady. She holds a doctorate in design and 2 master's degrees. It seems this First Lady is not only academically talented, but also very hardworking. And after completing numerous educational programs, she met the most important man in her life. There are several different stories about how Kim Ki-on-hee and Yoon Suk-yeol met, but generally there are 3 versions. The first is the official statement that they were introduced by a monk. This monk was a mutual friend of both, around 2010, who arranged for them to meet. In their first meeting, Kim Ki-on-hee appeared simple with her old glasses, while Yoon Suk-yeol exuded a refined scholarly demeanor in simple attire. At first, Kim Ki-on-hee thought Yoon Suk-yeol looked like a scholar. At that time, Yoon Suk-yeol was a prosecutor. He fell in love with Kim Ki-on-hee at first sight, but being 12 years her senior, he felt somewhat hesitant about expressing his feelings. There's a tale that after that meeting, Yoon Suk-yeol was torn about whether to pursue Kim Ki-on-hee, ultimately discarding her business card. But before discarding it, he managed to remember the email address on it. After some internal struggle, Yoon Suk-yeol gathered the courage to email Kim Ki-on-hee, expressing his affection. Surprisingly, she reciprocated his feelings. During that meeting, Yoon Suk-yeol left an impression of being sincere, but somewhat clumsy. Later, with the help of a mutual acquaintance, they met again. Yoon Suk-yeol began texting Kim Ki-on-hee, not many words, but all were expressions of care. Yoon Suk-yeol showed a rare romantic side, while pursuing Kim Ki-hee. For instance, once while at work, he took time to visit Kim Ki-hee's favorite bakery, bought her favorite dessert, and delivered it to her doorstep with a note saying, "Don't forget to have dessert with your meal. It will make you happier." Later, Kim Ki-hee shared that these seemingly unintentional but very thoughtful actions gradually opened her heart to Yoon Suk-yeol, feeling that he was genuinely sincere. Thus, they quickly came together, starting a sweet romance. According to North Korea's Daily NK, at a private gathering, friends asked Kim Ki-hee why she chose Yoon Suk-yeol. She smiled and answered, "Yoon Suk-yeol might not be good at wooing girls, but he will treat me sincerely. This is more important than anything else." After 2 years of dating, Yoon Suk-yeol, 52, took Kim Ki-hee, 40, by the hand and walked into the wedding hall. According to Kim Ki-hee's memories, at that time, Yoon Suk-yeol had only 20 million won in his account, equivalent to about $15,000 at today's exchange rate. For a man in his 50s without a firm standing in politics, this amount of savings was indeed quite modest. However, Yoon Suk-yeol faced this calmly and promised his wife, "I'm willing to cook for you for the rest of my life." This statement was not flowery, like a warm spring breeze. Kim Ki-hee knew this was not an empty promise, but one of genuine and steadfast love. Besides the official introduction by the monks, there are 2 other versions. The second version, according to some sources, is that they met at a business event. At that time, Kim Ki-hee was running an art exhibition company, while Yoon Suk-yeol was a renowned prosecutor. They conversed and were quickly drawn to each other's intellect and passion. The third version, some people believe they met through mutual friends. They had encountered each other a few times at gatherings before officially dating. Regardless of which story is true, one thing is certain: Yoon Suk-yeol fell for Kim Ki-hee at first sight. He actively pursued her with sincerity and romantic gestures. Kim Ki-hee later shared that these subtle and considerate actions gradually opened her heart to Yoon Suk-yeol, making her feel his genuine affection. Not long after, they officially started dating, beginning a sweet romance. This shows the deep affection Yoon Suk-yeol had for Kim Ki-hee. As time passed, this couple, with a 12-year age gap, had been married for 10 years without having children together. Instead, they raised 4 dogs and 3 cats as family companions. In an interview with Junggang Ilbo, a close friend of the couple stated that their relationship was built on trust and sincerity. Although Kim Ki-hee has an extroverted personality, while Yoon Suk-yeol is more reserved, their love for each other is undeniable. This friend also revealed that Kim Ki-hee often called Yoon Suk-yeol a naughty old man, while Yoon Suk-yeol saw her as his spiritual guide. And even after marriage, Yoon Suk-yeol kept his promise to cook for his wife. But Kim Ki-hee occasionally cooked Korean-style braised chicken, her husband's favorite dish. He once said, "The image of my wife in the kitchen is the true image of a Korean family." After marriage, Kim Ki-hee did not choose to be a housewife, but continued her teaching career at various universities. This lifestyle lasted for 5 years until 2017, when she started to reduce her teaching workload because her husband was appointed as the chief prosecutor of the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office. By 2022, with Yoon Suk-yeol's election as president of South Korea, Kim Ki-hee officially became the First Lady. Since then, she quickly became the focal point of public attention. Kim Ki-hee always paid attention to her personal image. Her makeup and fashion style at public events quickly became hot topics. In August 2022, during a European trip to attend the NATO summit, the South Korean First Lady drew media attention with a necklace worth around 60 million won, over $46,000. Kim Ki-hee's sophisticated and trendy fashion sense received much praise. Many believe she contributed to crafting an elegant and confident image for South Korea. However, her lavish style also faced mixed reactions. Some felt she dressed too extravagantly, not fitting the image of the First Lady that the public expected. According to statistics, the total value of jewelry and handbags Kim Ki-hee used at public events during her tenure as First Lady exceeded 200 million won, about $153,000. These lavish expenditures sparked fierce debates in South Korean public opinion. Many citizens believe Kim Ki-hee lived out of touch with reality, lacking empathy for the struggles of ordinary people. The criticism was not just aimed at her spending habits, but also related to controversies about her past, which gradually came to light. The public began to see that this First Lady had too many negative points. Moreover, the First Lady's beauty has continuously been a subject of debate and discussion. On the evening of May 21st, 2022, Kim Ki-hee, along with Yoon Suk-yeol, attended a reception at the National Museum of Korea, where they met former U.S. President Joe Biden. Biden congratulated her and praised her beauty. Indeed, at 50, Kim Ki-hee still possesses delicate features and a radiant complexion. Her face not only lacks clear wrinkles, but also features full, high cheekbones. Therefore, whether she has undergone cosmetic surgery has become a hot topic on social media. From this, Kim Ki-hee's beauty secrets have gradually been revealed. In one interview, she shared that she spends 30 minutes each morning on skincare, maintains a strict diet to keep her figure, and employs an entire professional team to tailor her style for each event. This is quite rare among previous South Korean first ladies. However, with such a perfect face, it's hard to believe there hasn't been some cosmetic intervention. Comparing her past and present photos clearly shows the difference. Her earlier face, with single eyelids and a low nose bridge, was simple and elegant, but perhaps not the ideal beauty according to traditional Korean standards. After several renovations, her face has become sharper and more defined. The frequent renovation of her appearance by the First Lady has faced criticism from a segment of netizens. They argue that the excessive pursuit of changing one's appearance is a sign of vanity and insincerity, negatively influencing young people's aesthetic values. This action not only damages her image and reputation as a public figure, but also impacts the national image. However, South Korea is well known for its openness to cosmetic surgery, perhaps leading the trend in Asia. Thus, alongside the criticisms, Kim Ki-hee also received support from numerous fans. Some of her supporters even established a fan club named Love Ki-hee and actively defend her against the criticisms. In response to the cosmetic surgery controversy, Kim Ki-hee stated, "I'm not overly obsessed with beauty, but I have indeed had cosmetic surgery. Before I had double eyelids, but they weren't symmetrical, so I had surgery at my uncle's friend's hospital while I was in university. As for my high school photo, I was squinting because the light was too bright." In other words, she admitted to having cosmetic surgery, but only minor procedures. But the story of Kim Ki-hee doesn't end with her beauty enhancements. Her past harbors even more shocking secrets. For Kim Ki-hee, the rumors about Julie were truly a significant shock. On June 19, 2021, an article titled Yoon Suk-yeol's X-File unexpectedly stirred public discourse. The author Jang Song-cheol is a controversial political commentator in South Korea. This article was like a bombshell, capturing the public's attention. It not only exposed Yoon Suk-yeol's hidden corners, but also directly targeted Kim Ki-hee, revealing parts of her mysterious and controversial past. According to the article, before meeting Yoon Suk-yeol, Kim Ki-hee used the alias Julie and worked as a hostess in the VIP room on the 6th floor of the Ramada Hotel in Gangnam, Seoul. This hotel was reportedly managed by Mr. Cho, chairman of the Sambu Construction Group. During her time at the hotel, Julie is said to have become acquainted with many influential figures in politics and business, including Yoon Suk-yeol, who later became her husband. Immediately after the article was published, the name Julie quickly spread online, sparking a storm of public opinion. The climax of the incident was a mural appearing on the outer wall of an old bookstore in Hongdae-jongno District, Seoul. The mural depicted a blonde woman with the words, "Julie's Dream," and "Dream of the First Lady." On the right side of the mural was a detailed timeline and names of several men. This suggestive image seemed to hint at unverified stories about Kim Ki-hee's past. The mural, approximately 15 meters wide and 2.5 meters tall, attracted a lot of attention from both the public and the media. The Julie incident became the focal point of discussion, seriously affecting Kim Ki-hee's image. Some believed it was a political plot to undermine her, while others thought the story depicted in the mural was true and needed further investigation. Feeling wronged by these baseless rumors, Kim Ki-hee was very upset. She considered this unfair and shocking. In an interview, she affirmed that she was a workaholic, having earned 2 master's degrees and a doctorate while teaching at universities and running her own company. Even if she wanted to be Julie, she wouldn't have had the time. However, despite her firm denials, it's notable that someone has come forward claiming to have met Julie. On Hae-wook, former president of the Korea Taekwondo Association, in an interview with Open Empathy TV, stated that he was invited by Mr. Cho, the chairman of Ramada Hotel, to the VIP room on the 6th floor on May 7, 1997, where he met Kim Ki-hee, then known as Julie. On Hae-wook said he was served very attentively by Julie, and met her 3 more times afterward. The story doesn't end there. Another witness claimed to have worked at a cafe next to the Ramada Hotel and saw Mr. Cho bringing prosecutor Young Jae-tak, Kim Ki-an-hee, and her mother for coffee. This person recounted that Kim Ki-an-hee's mother paid in advance and left, while others whispered that Julie was Young Jae-tak's mistress. This person told the story with a conviction as strong as nails in wood. Facing an increasing number of accusations, Kim Ki-an-hee finally decided not to remain silent. In September 2022, she filed a lawsuit against those spreading false rumors. The Seoul prosecutor's office concluded that the information about Julie was fabricated and prosecuted those involved with the television station and Mr. On Hae-wook for violating election laws for public officials. Ultimately, 10 individuals were arrested and fined. However, despite the legal conclusion, for a segment of the South Korean population, Julie is indeed Kim Ki-an-hee. The controversy didn't stop with the Julie scandal. On December 14, 2021, the South Korean television network YTN reported that 3 dissertations published by Kim Ki-an-hee during her doctoral studies at Kookmin University showed signs of plagiarism. It's evident that, in terms of research topics, Kim Ki-an-hee seemed more interested in divination than academic research. These 3 dissertations were all contentious, ranging from direct copying of existing works to piecing together content from online posts. More absurdly, some sections of the dissertations even used unedited machine translations. For example, the English title of her second dissertation, meant to be membership retention, was incorrectly translated as member Yu-gil due to translation software errors. Yu-gil is the Korean transliteration of maintenance. This means the dissertation was ostensibly discussing a member named Yu-ji. A cursory check would reveal this error, but clearly she did not. Kang Min-young, a representative of the Democratic Party in the National Assembly, after reviewing all of Kim Ki-an-hee's dissertations, criticized them for being low quality, lacking substance, and filled with nonsensical content. He argued that these documents could only be called materials, not dissertations. In a radio interview, he said, "I've read all of her dissertations. The basic Korean grammar structure is very poor, and even after reading a sentence, I still don't understand what it means." Former MP Choi Min-hee also sarcastically remarked, "Is Kim Ki-an-hee Yoon Suk-yeol's wife? I feel sorry for him." As the public outcry over Kim Ki-an-hee's plagiarism grew, even Kookmin University students couldn't stay silent. They publicly demanded a clear investigation to protect the university's reputation. However, under societal pressure, the university's response was to delay. On July 7, 2021, the university finally spoke out, announcing an independent investigation into Kim Ki-an-hee's dissertations. Yet 2 months later, they declared the investigation was dropped because the statute of limitations had expired. This reason was akin to pouring fuel on the fire, igniting nationwide criticism. Critics were relentless. Kang Min-young stated bluntly, "Because of one Kim Ki-an-hee, Kookmin University has flushed 75 years of its history down the drain." On October 1st, around 200 Kookmin University alumni returned their degrees in protest of the university's decision. Under public pressure, on November 4th, the university announced the formation of a review committee and committed to releasing results by February 15, 2022. However, after what was supposed to be an independent investigation, the final conclusion was that Kim Ki-an-hee's dissertation did not constitute academic misconduct. In response to this outcome, a current professor at Kookmin University lamented, "Justice has vanished before power." As the storm over the dissertation had barely subsided, new information once again thrust Kim Ki-an-hee into the eye of the public storm. On January 25, 2022, the South Korean Ministry of Education pointed out that she had submitted a falsified application with fake qualifications and work experience when applying for a part-time professorship at Kookmin University in 2014. More absurdly, in her application, she claimed to have won an award at the Seoul International Animation Festival in 2004. These numerous deceptive statements shattered the carefully constructed image she had built. Eventually, even Yoon Suk-yeol had to apologize on behalf of his wife, acknowledging the mistake and expressing willingness to accept criticism. Later, Kim Ki-an-hee held a press conference, admitting to having exaggerated her resume with the aim of making herself look better. The perfect image, meticulously crafted through numerous touch-ups by the First Lady, finally crumbled under the harsh light of truth. This was indeed a shameful affair. On the surface, Kim Ki-on-hee appears to be just a first lady standing behind her husband, but many opinions suggest that she actually exerts significant influence over Yoon Suk-yeol's political decisions more than one might imagine. For instance, there are numerous suspicions about her interference in some crucial personnel appointments. When Yoon Suk-yeol took office as president, Kim Ki-on-hee's shadow seemed to loom over many key policy decisions, particularly in stock manipulation and official appointments. One of the most notorious financial scandals involving Kim Ki-on-hee was the Deutsche Motors case. Simply put, she colluded with some insiders to conduct massive buy and sell transactions, creating a false price to inflate stock values, then dumping them at the peak to reap profits worth tens of billions of won. According to reports by the South Korean media No Kurt News, Kim Ki-on-hee maintained a close relationship with one of the main masterminds of the incident, and the flow of money in her accounts became a focal point of the investigation. Although she publicly declared multiple times that she had never directly participated in any illegal transactions, the investigation results show a high level of suspicion against her. A shocking twist in Kim Ki-on-hee's scandal was the mysterious death of a key investigating officer. While the South Korean police were actively investigating the Deutsche Motors case, this important investigator was suddenly found dead at his home. This person was a member of the Seoul Police's Economic Crime Investigation Team, responsible for tracking the money trail related to Kim Ki-on-hee. Initially, the police concluded it was a suicide, citing no signs of forced entry. However, this conclusion quickly sparked waves of public doubt. According to news tape, this officer had shared with colleagues before his death that the case was extremely complex, and the investigative pressure was immense. He also expressed facing many obstacles in his work, even feeling disheartened. What was even more suspicious was that just a few days before his death, he received a call from an unknown number. The content of this call has never been disclosed. After Yoon Suk-yeol's election as president, the case seemed to be shelved, no longer actively investigated as before. The opposition immediately criticized this as a clear example of power protection. Meanwhile, Yoon Suk-yeol's administration insisted that Kim Ki-on-hee was merely a victim of character assassination, and that there was insufficient evidence to charge her. Besides the Deutsche Motors scandal, Kim Ki-on-hee's family was also embroiled in several financial controversies. Particularly, her mother, Choi Yoon-soon, was accused of illegal real estate speculation. Choi was found to have purchased numerous plots of land at abnormally low prices, then quickly resold them at a high profit. These shady deals raised questions. Could there have been assistance from high-level officials behind these transactions? Especially since Kim Ki-on-hee's husband, President Yoon Suk-yeol, might have facilitated these for his wife's family to profit. Another contentious point was Kim Ki-on-hee's art exhibition company, Kavana Contents. Many believe that Kavana Contents was actually a tool for money laundering for her family. For example, she used this company to collaborate on exhibitions with several large corporations, some of whose executives were suspected of being involved with her in questionable stock dealings. However, compared to the financial scandals, the accusations that Kim Ki-on-hee directly intervened in official appointments solidified her influence over national power. According to the Hankyor National Daily, when Yoon Suk-yeol was the chief prosecutor of the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office, he often followed Kim Ki-on-hee's suggestions in personnel appointments. A prime example was a young prosecutor from the Seoul High Prosecutor's Office, who had business ties with Kim Ki-on-hee's mother's investment company. Despite no outstanding achievements, he was promoted to a higher position unusually. Not only within the judicial system, even Yoon Suk-yeol's election team was accused of having close ties with Kim Ki-on-hee. According to Chosun Ilbo, the Korea Daily, during her husband's campaign, Kim Ki-on-hee was not only involved in shaping communication strategies, but also secretly met with several high-level advisors, directly managing campaign operations. This caused dissatisfaction within South Korea's prosecutorial system. However, due to Yoon Suk-yeol's hardline stance, these dissatisfactions were suppressed. Some people thus opposed and mocked that President Yoon had two bosses, one power, the other his wife. And one of the most controversial statements about Kim Ki-on-hee was her saying, "My husband loves me, I love handbags." The story began with a secretly recorded video from 2022, exposed by Seoul Voice. In this video, Kim Ki-on-hee was given luxury perfumes and cosmetics by Pastor Choi Jae-yong, an influential figure in the Korean community in the U.S. But that wasn't the end of it. In September of that year, She received a Dior bag worth $3 million, over $2,300. Facing controversies about receiving lavish gifts, President Yoon Suk-yeol once again stepped forward to defend his wife. He declared, "She's just too kind. She doesn't know how to say no, not that she's cold or indifferent." And each time a scandal erupted, Yoon Suk-yeol would speak out in defense of his wife, to the extent that South Korean media dubbed him the #1 lovesick hero on the Korean peninsula. Under Yoon Suk-yeol's administration, investigations into allegations of bribery against Kim Ki-on-hee were merely for show. Eventually, the Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission of South Korea announced that she had not violated the law. It seems that as long as her husband holds power, the law can't touch her. The law at this point appears to be tailored for Kim Ki-on-hee. However, Kim Ki-on-hee could not hide behind the shield of power forever. In 2023, the opposition in the South Korean National Assembly pushed through the Special Kim Ki-on-hee Act. The purpose of this law was to appoint a special prosecutor to independently investigate all scandals related to her. But once again, Yoon Suk-yeol appeared at the right moment to rescue his wife. On January 5, 2024, President Yoon used his veto power to reject this bill. Although those opposing Kim Ki-on-hee continuously attacked her with numerous scandals, upon closer inspection, there are many suspicious points. For instance, the pastor who secretly recorded the video of Kim Ki-on-hee receiving the handbag was not entirely impartial. Did he have political motives? After all, South Korean politics is known for its ruthless power struggles, and targeting the president's wife has long been a familiar strategy. Even Kim Ki-on-hee herself spoke out to deny the allegations, suggesting they were smear tactics aimed at damaging her and her husband's reputation. And now, after Yoon Suk-yeol's arrest, many are curious to see how Kim Ki-on-hee will react. Will she try to protect herself? Or will she be dragged into the political vortex? But it seems people have worried too much. Because right after Yoon Suk-yeol's arrest, the press captured images of Kim Ki-on-hee leisurely walking her dog in the garden. An image full of implications during a time of political tension. Could she be more complex than the media portrays? Since she first appeared in the public eye, Kim Ki-on-hee has been continuously embroiled in controversy. But perhaps the issues surrounding her are not solely her responsibility. South Korean media has presented two small stories that offer a different perspective on her. Story 1. She's always ready to help friends. According to Chosun Ilbo, Kim Ki-on-hee is very helpful to friends. Once, a college friend of hers was struggling to organize an art exhibition due to a lack of funds. Kim Ki-on-hee leveraged her personal connections to solicit sponsorships, and even personally attended the exhibition's opening to boost its influence. In an interview, she said, "The dreams of friends are worth protecting." Story 2, an animal lover. According to Hank Yura, besides being busy with politics, Kim Ki-on-hee is also a great animal lover. She keeps many pets and often participates in animal protection activities. On social media, she once shared an image of rescuing a stray cat, accompanied by the status, "Every life is as important as a family member." So we might never know exactly who Kim Ki-on-hee is. Is she a controversial political figure, or the center of academic and financial scandals? But she also has another side, that of an influential figure in academia, art, and media. Regardless of whether the public loves or hates her, no one can deny Kim Ki-on-hee's influence. She has left a deep mark on South Korean politics, becoming an unavoidable figure in any political discussion. Story 2. This event took place in the year 2000 and shook the entire United States. It became one of the most famous prison breaks in American history. This was the notorious escape of the Texas Seven, a group made up of some of the most formidable inmates. These 7 prisoners planned a daring breakout. Their method of escape was unlike anything one might imagine. They didn't dig tunnels, they didn't sneak away. Instead, they drove out of the prison with a boldness and calm, as if nothing was happening. How could this be? Who were these 7 men? Wasn't there anyone to notice and bring them back to prison? The John B. Connolly Unit is one of the most secure prisons in South Texas, USA. Built in 1995, it's an all-male prison that can house over 2,000 inmates. Surrounded by vast fields, the main gate faces southwest. Outside the prison, there's a 4-meter-high electric fence. Even with specialized tools, it's incredibly difficult to breach. On the north, east, and south sides, there's 1 watchtower each. Guards are posted 24/7 to monitor the entire facility. Any slight movement would be immediately detected. Steel barriers separate the prison areas, and there are unscheduled patrol vehicles on the pathways. Additionally, surveillance cameras are placed in many corners of the prison. From this level of security, it's clear that escaping from here would be nearly impossible. However, within this prison were 7 serious criminals. They were the ones set to challenge what seemed impossible. They were planning a prison break. The organizer and planner among these 7 was then 30 years old. He had been arrested for multiple robberies and kidnappings, sentenced to 18 terms, ranging from 15 years to life. But instead of waiting to die, he thought it better to take a risk for a chance at freedom rather than remain there for life. He recruited 6 more accomplices to execute the plan with him. The leader was none other than George Rivas. At that time, George was serving a 99-year sentence for kidnapping, theft, and armed robbery. The others were Michael Anthony Rodriguez, 38 years old, serving 15 years, Larry Harper, 37 years old, Joseph Garcia, Patrick Murphy, both 39 years old, each serving 50 years, Donald Newberry, with the longest sentence of 100 years, and the youngest, Randy Halperin, 23 years old, serving 30 years for attacking a child. How did they manage to escape from this heavily secured facility? Let's go back to December 13, 2000. It was a Wednesday when Rivas and his group of 7 decided to execute their escape plan. They had discussed beforehand. Their plans were varied and detailed. They had repeatedly simulated the escape, preparing for all possible scenarios. Despite being serious criminals, these 7 had behaved well within the prison, never causing trouble. This behavior earned them recognition from the guards, leading to opportunities to work in the prison's maintenance room. Such work opportunities were coveted by all inmates, granted only to those with good conduct. A group of 7 took advantage of their time in the maintenance room to secretly plot their escape. They had clear roles. Each was responsible for observing a guard's active and rest times. After a long period of gathering information, they found that midday was the time when surveillance was the most lax. They decided to act during this window, significantly increasing their chances of escape. When other inmates working in the maintenance room had left for lunch, Rivas and his 6 accomplices chose to stay behind. He contacted the maintenance office, saying they wanted to have lunch with a few friends. They wanted to eat in the maintenance room, so they could start working immediately after. Rivas had been in this prison for 5 years. In those 5 years, he never caused trouble, always followed the rules, and worked diligently. The management believed he was still an honest man, so they allowed him and some colleagues to stay in the maintenance room for lunch. The 7 successfully stayed in the maintenance room as planned. After waiting for a while, a supervisor entered the maintenance room. The 7 inmates seized the opportunity, ambushing him from behind and knocking him unconscious. They stripped him of his clothes, bound his hands and feet, then dragged him into the adjacent electrical room, locking the door. For the next 1.5 hours, anyone who returned to the maintenance room was similarly attacked, knocked out, and locked in the electrical room. In total, they abducted 14 people, including not only prison staff, but also some inmates. Among these 14, one tried to escape, but found the electrical room door locked, unable to call for help. This employee noticed that the room was filled with storage equipment, including a fire alarm. He pressed the fire alarm. The control room operator received the fire alert from the maintenance room. They then called the maintenance room to check the situation. By then, only the 7 prisoners remained. When the phone rang, they didn't answer. The control operator, seeing no one picked up, assumed the alarm was a false activation. At this point, the operator thought everyone in the maintenance room had gone back to work and didn't answer. This alarm must be a mistake. And so, the operator turned off the alarm. This mistake allowed Rivas and the others to breathe a sigh of relief. They then donned the prison staff uniforms, took the staff ID cards, not forgetting the credit cards and cash they had, and proceeded with the next phase of their plan. As they initiated the next step, Rivas and 3 accomplices went to the prison's control center. They posed as employees, saying they needed to install surveillance cameras. The guard, although not recognizing them, saw they were in work clothes and didn't seem suspicious, so he let them in. After gaining entry to the control room, the other 3 in the maintenance room knew it was time. They called the control room to distract the guard. Suddenly, Rivas and his 3 accomplices took advantage of the guard's inattention, attacked him, and bound him. They took the guard's gun, gained control over the entire control room, then opened the back gate of the prison. The other three left the maintenance room and climbed into a white prison utility truck they had stolen. They drove it to pick up Rivas. The group got into the truck, leaving the control center. Rivas remained calm and confident, continuing to pretend to be a staff member. One of them even impersonated a prison guard, checking if anything was amiss in the truck. They pretended to inspect the vehicle once around because there were other staff outside, and they had to complete this act together. When all 7 were in the truck, the guard in the watchtower waved to them. They waved back, but in reality, they were feeling incredibly tense. Then, with a speed of 30 kilometers per hour, they casually exited through the prison's back gate. And so, the group of 7 criminals escaped successfully. Upon hearing about the escape, state police immediately directed guards to major city intersections, setting up checkpoints. Every vehicle had to undergo a strict inspection. 2 hours later, the police found the white truck in the parking lot of a Walmart in Kennedy City. This was the truck of the 7 escaped prisoners, located 4.8 kilometers from the prison. It seemed that after leaving the prison, they had switched vehicles and fled. But where did this new vehicle come from? The police checked for recently stolen vehicles near the Walmart, but found no useful leads. According to the information, these 7 inmates had overpowered 9 maintenance staff members, 4 prison officers, and 3 unrelated inmates through violent means. They also acquired a significant amount of weapons from the prison guard's room. No one knew what they intended to do with so many weapons. To ensure public safety, the police had to act swiftly to capture and bring the criminals to justice. So where could these 7 criminals possibly flee to? Texas, where the prison is located, borders Mexico. If the criminals escaped southward, they would quickly reach Mexico. The police suspected that this group might choose this plan. Therefore, they began to increase security along the Mexican border to block any attempt at crossing. Major cities in Texas plastered photos of the criminals to heighten public alertness. According to the investigation, the mastermind, Rivas, grew up in El Paso, Texas. At 6 years old, his parents divorced, and he lived with his grandparents and 3 uncles along with 3 sisters. However, he started his criminal path during high school. He stole money from a small store's cash register. Later, his robberies escalated. Rivas worked for a year at Pilar's store, then decided to rob it. He bound all the store employees, dragged them into a room, and locked the door. Then, Rivas took all the money and fled. 10 months later, he returned to the same store and robbed it again. After many store heists, he crafted a plan to rob a large supermarket. To ensure the plan wouldn't fail, he recruited some allies, posing as security guards to gain the trust of the supermarket staff. When the employees weren't paying attention, they attacked everyone at the scene, tied them up, locked them in a room, and proceeded to empty the supermarket's cash into their bags. Rivas' plan seemed foolproof, but no criminal is without flaws. Rivas made a mistake. One day, Rivas and 2 accomplices went to a toy store. During the robbery, one employee managed to untie himself and called 911 to report the situation. Since the employee was too afraid to speak or say anything meaningful, he hung up. However, 911 received the call. If a call is disconnected, the operator will call back. The phone started ringing, immediately shattering the silence in the store. All the employees were terrified. Rivas glanced at the phone, saw it was 911 calling back, and couldn't help but feel panic. At this moment, Rivas was standing close to an employee and allowed the person next to him to answer the phone. The operator asked questions and received a very strange response, suggesting the person might be in a hostage situation, but unable to ask for help directly. So, the operator urgently notified the police to check out the situation at the toy store. Upon arrival, because there were many hostages inside, and for their safety, the police spent nearly 3 hours trying to negotiate with the robber. But there was no result. Then the SWAT team stormed the toy store, capturing Rivas and his accomplices. Through this toy store robbery, and the gun Rivas used, the police traced back and discovered several local stores had encountered the same gang, all using the same gun. As a result, Rivas was charged with multiple counts of armed robbery, with aggravating circumstances. Due to Rivas' habit of tying up all employees before looting, he was also charged with kidnapping. After a week's trial, the jury found Rivas guilty, and he was sent to prison. By the year 2000, Rivas had been in prison for 5 years. His wife had divorced him. Rivas clearly understood he had no hope in life anymore, so he planned this escape. The police quickly realized Rivas was the leader of this prison break. They knew he was very intelligent, and had strong control over situations. Catching him again would not be easy. El Paso, where Rivas grew up, was 991 kilometers west of the prison, a 9-hour drive. It's also a city on the Mexican border. Rivas was very familiar with the area. The police believed he might return to his hometown of El Paso, and then the 7 inmates would seize the opportunity to escape into Mexico. Therefore, the entire city of El Paso was plastered with wanted posters for the 7. Vehicles entering the city were subjected to stricter checks. Rivas had anticipated this, so they changed their plan and abandoned the idea of going to Mexico. They roamed around Texas. They first went to San Antonio, then to Portland, where they broke into a local store, taking a lot of cash and some electronic devices, including a wireless radio. 2 days after the Texas police began their pursuit, the FBI also joined the manhunt. Meanwhile, Rivas' group used the stolen radio equipment to monitor police movements, evading capture after their escape. 6 days after escaping from prison, one of the 7 used a false name to check into a hotel in Farmers Branch, 580 kilometers from the prison. 5 more days passed, bringing them to December 24th, Christmas Eve, making it 11 days since they had been on the run. They continued their wanderings across Texas, reaching the city of Irvine, where they broke into a local sports store called Oshman's Sporting Goods. They stole at least 40 guns, some ammunition, clothing in a shopping cart, and $70,000 in cash from the safe. During the robbery, a female employee who had just finished her shift noticed the unusual activity in the store and immediately called 911. Officer Aubrey Hawkins was dispatched to check the situation at the sports store and quickly arrived at the scene. The 7 criminals were still frantically looting items. Unexpectedly, they heard from the radio that police were nearby. They quickly moved to the back of the store to assess the situation. Rivas saw an officer in the car, preparing to get out. In the emergency, Rivas fired a shot at the police car. The bullet went through the windshield, hitting Officer Hawkins in the right shoulder. Officer Hawkins immediately called for backup. Then, Rivas fired 3 more shots. His accomplices, seeing the situation, also fired continuously. In the end, Officer Hawkins was hit by 11 bullets and fell. By the time police backup arrived, Rivas and his group had long escaped. Officer Hawkins was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately could not be saved. After Captain Hawkins' death, the severity of the case escalated once again. The search expanded from Texas to the entire USA. Reward of $100,000 was offered to gather information, leading to the capture of these escaped criminals. After that, all citizens quietly contributed to the effort to apprehend the criminals. Eventually, the total reward reached $500,000. 3 weeks after the prison break, Rivas and his group arrived in Woodland Park, where they abandoned their previous vehicle and bought a new brown car. 1 month after their escape, a television program called America's Most Wanted detailed the entire escape process. They released images of Rivas and the others. After the broadcast, they indeed received tips from citizens. Someone reported seeing these individuals at the Cokerite Motel and RV Park in Woodland Park, posing as missionaries. They were always playing religious music loudly in their vehicle. Upon receiving this information, the police immediately took action. They spotted Rivas, Garcia, and Rodriguez in a jeep at the RV park. Around 10 a.m., Rivas, Garcia, and Rodriguez left in the vehicle. Since the RV park was crowded, the police were concerned that a forced capture might harm innocent bystanders. So they decided not to stir the situation. They quietly followed the jeep. The 3 drove on, unaware of the police tailing them. At a gas station, they got out of the car. The police seized the opportunity, capturing Rivas, Garcia, and Rodriguez. At this point, 2 other criminals, Halperin and Harper, were still in the vehicle. The police surrounded them. Halperin almost immediately stepped out of the car and surrendered. He told the police that Harper inside the car wanted to make one last call to his father. This request was denied. Not long after, everyone present heard gunshots. The police continued calling out to Harper inside the car, asking him to disarm. After a few minutes, another shot rang out from inside the vehicle. The police decided to enter the car. However, when they opened the door, they found Harper lying face down on the ground. He had shot himself twice in the chest and died on the spot. Afterwards, Harper, Garcia, Rodriguez, and Rivas were taken into custody. They were detained by the federal government. At this point, 2 criminals remained at large. After investigation, the police found $10,000, some ammunition, and 35 loaded guns in the vehicle. 2 days after the arrests, the FBI received information that the last two fugitives, Newberry and Murphy, were hiding in a resort hotel in Colorado Springs. The police quickly arrived and located Newberry and Murphy. The police reached an agreement with the two, allowing them to be interviewed before being arrested. The next morning, a radio host was brought to the resort for a phone interview. During the live broadcast, Newberry and Murphy harshly criticized Texas's criminal justice system. Ultimately, all the escaped prisoners were captured and brought to justice. In August 2001, the trial for the murder of Officer Hawkins began. Rivas claimed that he had been shot 7 times by Hawkins. However, based on the evidence at the scene, Hawkins hadn't even had the chance to draw his gun before falling. The 7 shots Rivas received were from his own panicked accomplices firing accidentally. After 2 weeks of trial, a verdict was reached. The court sentenced Rivas to death. The other 5 accomplices received similar sentences. Court records showed 4 admitted to shooting at Officer Hawkins. In the following years, Rivas, Rodriguez, Newberry, and Garcia were executed one by one. Murphy and Halperin had their executions temporarily postponed. The 7 escapees were finally captured and paid the price for their criminal actions. Story 3. On the night of January 8, 1999, a man caused his newlywed wife to stop breathing, then hid her body in a suitcase and burned it in the icy waters of a lake. The unfortunate woman was Julie Marie Scully, a beautiful girl who had once been a famous model, living a life of luxury with a husband who adored her. But gradually, Julie grew tired of the dull marriage and then met George, a poor, balding, and somewhat ascetic man. However, Julie chose to abandon her affluent life to pursue this new love, returning to a remote town to get married. Who could have imagined that this decision would lead her to such a tragic end? Why did Julie, who had immersed herself in new happiness, meet such a sorrowful fate? Julie's story is not just about love and betrayal, but also the secrets hidden behind closed doors. On July 8, 1989, Tim Nist, a successful 32-year-old businessman, met Julie, a vibrant 21-year-old girl, relaxing on the beach under the bright summer sun. Her skin bronzed. Tim fell in love with her at first sight. From that moment, their lives were intertwined, and they loved each other inseparably. They enjoyed sweet days together. Tim's love for Julie was not just emotional, but also responsible and guiding. He was the mentor who helped Julie step by step towards her dreams. Under Tim's encouragement, Julie entered a beauty pageant. In no time, she passed the preliminaries and advanced to the finals. From then on, Julie's life took a different path, where she was determined to become a professional model despite all obstacles. By day, she still went to Tim's office to help with work, but when night fell, Julie was immersed in her passion for modeling. By day, she still went to Tim's office to help with work, but when night fell, Julie was immersed in her passion for modeling. She practiced relentlessly, striving to conquer the glamorous path. With her unwavering determination, Julie applied to model for a bikini magazine, and when the magazine was published, the whole town began to know the Julie Marie Scully. Her career started to flourish, turning her into a local star, attracting attention at many public events where she met not only the mayor but also many influential figures. In the fall of 1990, Julie officially stepped onto the stage of glory, becoming a beauty queen. But happiness didn't last long. On November 16, 1991, Julie and Tim held their wedding at a large church in Hamilton Square, New Jersey. From the outside, their life was the dream of many, successful, happy, and wealthy. However, cracks began to appear in their marriage, as Julie's career became more and more brilliant. They started to drift apart and no longer attended events together. Julie, who once trusted Tim's love, began to doubt. Strangely, even though her beauty attracted much attention from other men, Tim seemed unconcerned. He didn't get jealous, didn't care, as if his love for her had long since cooled. In February 1995, Julie became pregnant with their first child, but from this point, her life began a new chapter full of challenges and difficulties. Throughout her pregnancy, in February 1995, Julie became pregnant with their first child, but from this point, her life began a new chapter full of challenges and difficulties. Throughout her pregnancy, Julie gained significant weight, which reminded her of her golden days as a model, and changes in both her appearance and psychology began to surface. Her personality became more sensitive and irritable, while her behavior grew increasingly unpredictable. In November of the same year, Julie gave birth to a baby girl. However, the joy was short-lived. Just months later, Julie fell into deep depression. Despite her efforts, she couldn't regain her former figure, and her modeling career gradually faded away. She had to accept being a full-time mother with a hidden sorrow. Worse still, Julie gradually realized she had lost her feelings for her husband. The relationship she once cherished now seemed bland. By April 1997, Julie and Tim decided to seek marriage counseling in hopes of saving their marriage. But the efforts seemed to yield little result. In November of that year, they planned a second Caribbean cruise, with the hope that the trip would bring them closer. And indeed, the trip changed everything, but not in the way Julie had anticipated. During the trip, Julie, now 29, met a young sailor named George Skiatopoulos, a 23-year-old with an attractive appearance and a complex past. George was born and raised in Greece. When he was young, his family broke apart, leaving him with deep resentment towards his father's infidelity. The conflict reached its peak when George injured his father with a knife. After graduating from university, George chose a life adrift at sea, starting work on the ship Galaxy, the very ship Julie and Tim were on. The meeting between Julie and George promised to open up a series of dramatic and dangerous events, a new turning point in Julie's turbulent life. When George first met Julie on the ship Galaxy, he was captivated by her dazzling beauty, especially her expensive dress and the prominent diamond ring. This made him quietly memorize her name and nurture hopes of wooing her. The next day, when the Galaxy docked, George intentionally approached Julie, exuding confidence and lying that he was a senior sailor on the ship. The girl was immediately impressed by George's foreign charm, and they conversed very well together. On the night before the ship was set to depart, George enthusiastically invited both Julie and Tim to tour the ship. On November 8, 1997, after the trip, Julie and Tim said goodbye to George and returned to New Jersey. Tim quickly forgot about the ordinary sailor, but Julie couldn't stop thinking about him. In the days that followed, George incessantly sent messages and called Julie, complimenting her and hinting that she deserved a man who would appreciate her. Sometimes Tim would answer when George called, but surprisingly he didn't suspect anything, even handing the phone to Julie without much thought. In this vulnerable time, Julie gradually transferred all her passion and hopes to George, unaware that just moments after praising her, George was flirting with another female colleague on the ship. In January 1998, for Julie's 30th birthday, she chose the ship Galaxy again to celebrate with her husband and friends. George continued to develop their relationship by inviting her for drinks. He welcomed Julie like an old friend, and in those rare private moments, Julie confided all her marital frustrations. She spoke about feeling trapped and desperate, unable to find an escape from her marriage. With his cunning and understanding, George invited Julie back to his room for a deeper conversation. A few hours later, Julie snuck back to her husband's side, but her mind was no longer there. In her heart, she believed George was the man she had always been looking for. After the trip ended, Tim began to notice changes in Julie. She became more distant and colder. One day in the kitchen, Tim found a photo with only half of George's face, and when he asked Julie about it, she dismissively replied that it was a gift from George. Tim couldn't imagine that his beautiful wife could be attracted to a man like George, whom he considered a balding sailor. On March 26, 1998, Julie returned to New Jersey once more, but not to resume her old life. After giving her heart completely to George, she decided to make significant changes in her life. After nearly 7 years together, Tim felt the exhaustion in their relationship and advised her to seek marriage counseling one last time. However, Tim was entirely unaware that the cause of their constant arguments was Julie's love for another man. When Julie refused counseling and declared she wanted to live alone, Tim angrily suggested they should divorce. In early June, Tim moved out of their home into another apartment to live alone, cutting off all contact and support for Julie. He said he wouldn't spend any more money on her, but Julie seemed unconcerned. Her mind was drifting toward George's ship. George persistently urged Julie to move to Greece quickly, and despite her initial concerns, Julie's resolve wavered with George's sweet promises. She began planning to move to Greece with her daughter, and on June 19, 1998, Julie took a flight to Vancouver, where she met George on the Galaxy. They lived in George's simple crew quarters. For Julie, the Galaxy was not just a mode of transport, but a symbol of love, where the sunset cast a golden glow on the sea, creating a romantic scene. On July 4, 1998, Julie returned to New Jersey and decided to return to modeling. She spent long hours in the gym, diligently working to regain her figure. By mid-July, Julie had lost 9 kilograms and happily sent a fax to George, announcing that many people had invited her to advertise in bars. However, George sharply criticized her, advising against letting other men see her allure. In George's opposition, Julie rejected the next modeling job, without realizing it was a sign of control. She thought it was just George showing concern, something Tim had never done. A few days later, Julie and George got engaged, planning to marry as soon as Julie finalized her divorce. To express his affection, George bought a cheap gold ring with dolphins to propose to Julie. Although the ring looked flashy, Julie excitedly showed it off to her friends as a surprise gift. At the end of July, Tim received a $7,000 phone bill and immediately called Julie's mother. Julie's mother couldn't hide the truth and had to confess about Julie's affair with George. Tim, feeling helpless, said if that's what Julie wanted, she should quickly finalize the divorce so they could both move on. On August 28th, Julie bought airplane tickets for George to come to her hometown. In the euphoric atmosphere, Julie excitedly embraced George and brought him home. In the following days, Julie took George shopping at the mall, buying him an expensive bracelet and suit. To help George with his dental and balding issues, Julie called an old friend to see if he would treat George, but was immediately refused. Subsequently, Julie found an advertisement for hair transplantation in a magazine and decided to spend $1,600 to book an appointment for George. This action infuriated Julie's mother, who disliked George's baldness and hated how he had ruined her daughter's family. During his unemployment, George frequently used Julie's credit card for lavish spending, especially when she worked night shifts. In September, Julie's divorce proceedings were finally completed, and Tim agreed to pay Julie $600,000 over the coming months. Julie officially introduced George to her family. Here George began to boast about himself, claiming he had worked on building the second largest ship in the world. Despite trying to appear successful, his true nature soon surfaced. Once, when Julie and her mother had a disagreement, George suddenly screamed and hit the wall. He grabbed Julie's mother by the throat, warning her not to speak to Julie that way again. Julie's mother, furious, ran out of the room and called the police. George was arrested, and the condition for his release was that he must return to Greece immediately. Initially, after the divorce, Tim gave up on investigating or interfering in Julie's life. However, when he heard from a friend that Julie and George planned to take their daughter to Greece, Tim got angry and called Julie, demanding she leave the child in the U.S. This time, both Tim's friends and Julie's family agreed that taking a 3-year-old to Greece would cause profound changes in the child's life, psychology, and development, from which recovery would be difficult. Ultimately, Julie left her daughter behind and decided to go to Greece alone. On October 20th, Julie flew to Greece, happily telling the man, who would deeply love her, that she had received $600,000 in divorce settlement. Such a large sum could help George start a taxi company in his hometown, Kavala. To welcome Julie, George's family organized a party. Before the party began, George seriously warned Julie not to mention she had been married and had a child, as his family was very sensitive about such matters. However, what George's family couldn't understand was why Julie, a beautiful and wealthy woman from America, would want to move to their impoverished town. Julie proudly pointed to the cheap engagement ring on her finger, saying it was all for love. According to the divorce agreement between Julie and Tim, her ex-husband would pay her $120,000 immediately after the divorce, then $5,000 per month until the total of $600,000 was paid. On December 8th, Julie and George got up early to the bank to open a joint account, deposit an $80,000 check, and Julie brought $18,000 in cash. She was excited to integrate into George's hometown community, but soon realized that this small town in northern Greece was incomparable to the affluent state of New Jersey. Due to the language barrier, Julie struggled to communicate with people around her, leading her to miss her home, friends, and daughter. The longing for her family made Julie restless. She couldn't stand this remote town. She hated the fatty food and the nearly mandatory 3-hour lunch breaks. On December 22nd, George's mother was shocked to discover Julie had been married before and began shouting in Greek. George immediately took Julie to a hotel, but the hotel costs quickly made him feel the pressure. On December 28th, George and Julie argued after Julie complained that this town was not as good as America. George's eyes went blank, and he suddenly grabbed Julie's throat. Fortunately, a friend of George was there and pulled him off. Julie felt the threat of death for the first time, realizing George was not the ideal man she thought he was. She intended to call the police, but George's friend consoled her, saying George was just tired and acted out of exhaustion. Time passed, and the conflicts between George and Julie continued to escalate. On January 4, 1999, Julie received notification that her luggage had arrived in Athens, Greece, and she could retrieve it. However, her heart was filled with sadness, because retrieving her luggage meant there would be no turning back. She would have to live in this town forever. In a state of tension, Julie contacted her friends in the U.S., who advised her to go through with the marriage to George as planned, and then wait for him to complete his military service so they could return to America. On January 8th, George and Julie completed their marriage paperwork, planning to hold the wedding on January 23rd. However, the silence between them became concerning. Julie, once very sociable, now isolated herself from the world. Her love was gradually replaced by fear, especially after George had attacked her before. Though they had the marriage certificate, both understood this marriage couldn't last. George's dreams of an easy, wealthy life were crumbling, and he believed Julie was planning to escape. By 5 p.m., George decided that if he couldn't have Julie, no one else should dream of her either. On this cold, damp night, George drove Julie along the Aegean coast towards Athens, Greece, to retrieve her luggage. When they reached a secluded spot, George stopped the car. Julie's heart pounded, a cold sweat ran down her neck, and suddenly George turned and choked her tightly. Julie screamed in panic and tried to free herself, but George exerted all his strength, squeezing her like wringing out a wet blanket. After it was over, George carried Julie's body to the trunk of the car and headed back to town. On the way, he stopped at a gas station to buy gasoline, then slowed down to find a suitable place to dispose of Julie's body. Finally, George chose a dirt road leading to 2 small lakes at the end. He poured gasoline over Julie, but because of the drizzling rain, he couldn't light the fire. George had no choice but to put Julie back in the car. Back home, he tried to pack the evidence of his crime into a suitcase, but couldn't fit all of Julie in. In the end, he had to use tools to separate her head to close the suitcase. Returning to the lakeshore, George tried to douse the suitcase with more gasoline, but still couldn't ignite it. Frustrated, he decided to throw the suitcase into the water and watched it sink. Then he took Julie's charred head and threw it hard over the cliff edge. For the next 2 days, George hid in the new apartment he and Julie had just rented. He cleaned all the evidence, destroyed Julie's passport and credit cards. To explain Julie's disappearance, George spent time creating a false alibi, needing only to deceive the police to stay safe. George withdrew money from their joint account, but first called his mother, breathlessly asking if they had seen Julie. Then he contacted his father, living in Athens, saying he suspected Julie had disappeared. Right after that, George and his father met at the police station to report Julie's missing. The police showed concern and sympathy according to procedure, but disappearances were so common locally, usually resolved within a few days, that they didn't take it too seriously. They advised George to search again. The next morning, George went to the U.S. Embassy to report Julie's disappearance, but the embassy staff considered it just a typical lover's quarrel. In the afternoon, George called Julie's friend, explaining that he and Julie got lost in Athens. Her friend's first reaction was suspicion that George had beaten Julie, causing her to run away. However, as time passed with no news of Julie, her friend grew worried and decided to contact George, while he lied that the Federal Bureau of Investigation had begun investigating her disappearance. He tried to sound cheerful, but couldn't hide his trembling, asserting he was glad the police were taking the matter seriously. Not long after, George called again to report he had been robbed and lost both his passport and Julie's photos. On January 21st, when he went to the bank to withdraw from their joint account, George was furious to learn that the nearly $90,000 US check hadn't been cleared yet, so he couldn't withdraw the money. Meanwhile, Julie's friends and family began to realize there was a problem. They contacted the U.S. Embassy in Athens, along with television reporters to follow up on Julie's disappearance. The Associated Press in the U.S. also reported on the case, forcing Greek authorities to take the situation seriously. George, as Julie's husband, became the focus of police and media attention. In front of the reporters, George repeated the story of Julie's disappearance, saying he rushed from Kavala to Athens to retrieve her luggage for this woman. Unexpectedly, this woman suddenly vanished. Throughout the interview, George kept referring to Julie as this woman, which raised suspicions among many. He also didn't forget to mention the robbery, where the thief used a weapon to steal his bag. On January 26th, George calmly walked into the Central Police Station in Athens. Now more than 2 weeks had passed since Julie's disappearance was reported, and he was confident he had committed the perfect murder, leaving no trace for the police to find. When facing the investigators, George repeated his fabricated alibi. However, when the police started questioning about Julie's passport, George suddenly became frightened. His story began to contradict itself. For hours later, George tearfully confessed that he had murdered Julie and had tried to dispose of her body by throwing it into a lake. He began recounting his relationship with Julie on the ship Galaxy, their meeting and falling in love. George said he had resigned to live with Julie, but carefully omitted the story of how he had attacked her mother. He didn't explain why he had left the U.S. to return to Greece. George recounted that after they returned to Greece, everything had changed. Julie didn't like the lifestyle there and was constantly complaining. He wished for Julie to return to the U.S. while he served in the military, but she refused, saying she didn't want to part ways. Therefore, he proposed either not serving in the military or both escaping to the U.S. But Julie declined, arguing he couldn't get a green card if he entered illegally. To reassure Julie about returning to the U.S., George could only pretend to be violent to ruin their relationship. On the way to retrieve her luggage in Athens, he once again discussed with Julie about returning to America, but she still didn't want to separate. They began to argue, and during the fight, he intentionally turned and choked Julie. Unexpectedly, she started screaming, making him fear others would notice, so he tightened his grip. Soon after, he realized Julie had stopped breathing. George tried to revive Julie, performing CPR, but it was to no avail. Feeling helpless, he decided to dispose of her body. Here, George cried, confessing to the police that since the murder, he had attempted to end his life 3 times, including cutting his wrists and taking pills, all without success. Around 10 p.m., George was handcuffed and placed in a police car, along with officers to search for Julie. The next morning, around 5 a.m., police were at the artificial lake where George had stopped. 2 hours later, divers found the suitcase underwater, now black from being burned. When the police opened the suitcase, they found Julie inside, but her head was missing, her body was curled up, and due to the cold weather, there was no decomposition. They placed her body in a vehicle and transported it to the forensic office in Athens. Around noon, an American senator handed over a letter to the Greek ambassador in Washington, expressing concern for the relationship between the 2 countries and hoping for a swift resolution to the case. The case made headlines in both U.S. and Greek newspapers, and Julie's family received the news. Julie's ex-husband, Tim, quickly traveled to Greece with the hope of bringing Julie back home. On February 2, 1999, Julie finally returned to New Jersey. Her funeral attracted media attention, forcing Tim to hire people to keep reporters and cameramen out of the church. It was a cold, windy winter day, and 150 friends and family members gathered at the church to bid farewell to Julie. For Julie, who had always sought love but couldn't feel it, this funeral might prove the love everyone had for her. During the ceremony, Tim held back tears, continuously caressing Julie's portrait, reminiscing about their old memories. Julie had given him a ring, and he saw their first meeting flash before his eyes, watching Julie strive for her modeling career. All this time, he didn't know what Julie wanted, family happiness or career success, but now he understood. Julie just wanted to be loved passionately. After the funeral, Julie's ashes were scattered around Dennisville Lake. On November 27, 1999, George was charged with the murder of Julie and the desecration of her body. George's lawyer planned to use his mental disorder as a defense. However, 6 weeks earlier, the Kavala court had unanimously decided that George had acted in a normal state of mind and must bear legal responsibility for his actions. On December 6th, exactly 1 year after Julie's death, George was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for murder. By October 2002, George appealed, citing good behavior in prison, and the appeals court reduced his sentence to 23 years. He has since been released and settled in Kamatini in northeastern Greece. Meanwhile, Julie's daughter has grown into a beautiful young woman, inheriting her mother's beauty, and is studying marketing at university. However, since she was little, there were no photos of her mother in her album. Tim, Julie's ex-husband, has lived out his life as a single man, dedicating all his efforts to his daughter. Fortunately, Tim's and Julie's families have maintained a good relationship, and that concludes the entire process of the case. Story 4. On May 23, 2014, several hundred luxury cars and thousands of New York residents gathered on the streets of New York to bury a Chinese woman. You might not know, but Chinese people living in the U.S. who organize such a funeral are usually not ordinary individuals. They are figures of global significance, and the Chinese woman we're discussing, though she appeared quite simple, was in reality a notorious queen in the underworld. Zheng Guoping, commonly known as Sister Ping, was infamous as the mother of all snakes, a queen in the realm of illegal immigration. To many, she was a woman with a cruel heart, treating human lives like disposable items. Yet there were those who saw her as a talented entrepreneur and a philanthropist with a kind heart, aiding those in need. So who was Sister Ping, really? Were there any secrets in her life? Zheng Guoping was born on January 9, 1949, in Fuzhou City, Fujian Province, in Shengmei Village, Dingjiang Town, China, a place renowned for illegal emigration. In Sister Ping's village, illegal emigration was a common occurrence. Even when migrants were deported, they would continue to return to the U.S. illegally. Many spent their lives going back and forth between deportation and re-entry to America. So much so, that in Sister Ping's village, there was a famous saying, "The sea never runs dry, just like illegal immigration never stops." Her father was among those who tried to escape to the Promised Land through illegal maritime migration. He disguised himself as a sailor, disembarked at New York's port, and fled. He then worked under the table in Chinatown. Later, through a disguised food store, he sent money back home. Sister Ping's childhood was spent waiting for her father's letters and money. In those letters, he described his life as prosperous. America was so rich that everyone was living very comfortably. But one day, after numerous illegal entries, he was caught and deported back to China. After that, he was never allowed to set foot in the U.S. again. Thus, he passed on his dream of his daughter, Sister Ping. Compared to sons who often had to sell their labor for wages, daughters could migrate to America through marriage. They only needed an American husband to take one step towards their dream. However, most of their targets were old, impoverished men who were undesirable in the American marriage market. Could a marriage just for citizenship be happy? Of course not. But for these girls' families, this was the only path to realize their American dream. Just one American citizen could bring the whole family over, and Sister Ping was one of those who came to the U.S. through this route. In the early 1970s, when Sister Ping was 20, she married a man surnamed Zhang from a neighboring village, mainly because his family had many relatives in Hong Kong. A year later, Sister Ping and her husband moved to Hong Kong. Zhang Guoping once sold vegetables at the market. Although she only completed primary education, she was very intelligent and quick with calculations. She truly had a knack for business. A few years later, she became the owner of 3 grocery stores and further invested in factories. But within Sister Ping, there was still the long-nurtured desire to achieve this American dream. But with young children, she chose to send her husband to the U.S. first. They opted for illegal sea migration and escaped once they landed in America. However, her husband also couldn't escape the fate of being arrested and deported, with his name even being added to the immigration blacklist. Sister Ping had tried many legal ways to get to the U.S., but failed at the visa application stage. Her hometown was notorious and on the immigration blacklist at the time. Coupled with her low educational background and family history of deportations, visa officers had more than enough reason to reject her outright. Even so, Sister Ping didn't give up. She managed to persuade an American couple who shopped at her store to help sponsor her for a visa as a full-time nanny. Finally, she got the opportunity for a visa interview. The interviewer asked her, "Why would you leave your comfortable life just to take care of someone else's children in a completely foreign country?" Indeed, Sister Ping's answer was perfect. America is a highly civilized nation, where hard work is rewarded with respect and fair compensation. I hope my efforts will give my children a better future. Her sincerity, or rather her acting talent, moved the interviewer, and she successfully obtained her visa to pursue her American dream. On November 17, 1981, Sister Ping set foot in the United States. Do you think Sister Ping would diligently work as a nanny as she claimed? Of course not. After paying the couple their fee, she went straight to New York's Chinatown. Here she found her fellow villagers. With her existing talent and relentless work ethic, she adapted quickly. She opened another grocery store. At this point, Zheng Guiping had entered legally. Later, she settled by applying for asylum, much easier than for those who entered illegally. Afterward, she brought her husband and children to the U.S. through marriage, completing the immigration for her whole family. Many immigrants like Sister Ping would choose a stable, day-to-day life, but she had greater ambitions. Leveraging her intelligence and diligence, in just a few years, she owned a fashion store and a small grocery shop in Chinatown. Her husband opened a small restaurant with a Fujianese style. In the mid-80s, China began its reforms and opened up to trade, which meant illegal immigration also boomed. Even the village where Sister Ping once lived was left with only the elderly, women, and children. Young men, given the chance, all went to America to make money. In many places, even village elementary schools started teaching children English. It seemed they were thoroughly preparing for the future to achieve the American dream. And from here, illegal entry became a very hot business on the market. At that time, on average, someone wanting to immigrate illegally had to pay a fee of $18,000. But as time went on, illegal entry became more difficult, thus the costs increased. Who would have thought that at this point, the illegal entry market was more profitable than even the trade in jade? The journey for illegal immigrants wasn't just about paying a large sum to step onto American soil. That was only the travel fee. There were no guarantees of safety. The path was fraught with dangers, and once they reached the promised land, they had to evade police. Many saved their entire lives and still couldn't afford one such journey. But there was no need to worry, for the human smugglers would sweet-talk them into high-interest loans with rates up to 30%. They had to work off their debts without legal identity, unable to open bank accounts. They had to use underground financial systems to send money back to China. You might not believe it, but this illegal immigration business supported half of Chinatown in the U.S., and Sister Ping, smart enough not to miss such a lucrative opportunity. In the early stages of human trafficking, Sister Ping's main clients were family members, friends and neighbors from her village. Particularly boys around 10 years old, because they were agile and healthy. Even when packed into containers and enduring dangerous sea voyages, these children had the strength to escape. More importantly, if caught, these children were under 18 and had no legal guardians in the U.S. So even if the immigration police wanted to deport them, it involved extremely complex procedures with long processing times. The longer the process, the more time these children had to work illegally, and they might even benefit from changes in immigration laws. Leaving family and arriving in a completely foreign country through illegal means certainly destabilizes the children's psychology. But in Sister Ping's eyes, as long as money could be made, the rest was not worth considering. Some children who had immigrated to the U.S. recounted that they were once in a small wooden house on the East Coast. They met Sister Ping once. She told them very decisively that someone would come to pick them up, but immigration officers were also on their way. Their job was to wait for their luck. If lucky, they would meet Sister Ping again at a small hotel in Chinatown. If not, they would never see her again. The entire room of children was terrified and trembling. After more than 10 minutes, several gangsters appeared. Without saying a word, they herded all the children into a van. For these children, the arrival of the gangsters was the luckier scenario. This meant they had a chance to stay in America. But they didn't know that this was only the beginning of their nightmare to come. In the years that followed, even up to 10 or 20 years, they had to work tirelessly to pay off their own debts. The interest was so high that they might never clear their debt. But if they thought about running away, they would be caught and beaten savagely. In more severe cases, they could lose a hand or a foot, or even be tortured by having their heads dunked in water. Whether they fell into the hands of gangsters living a life of hardship, or were caught by the police and deported, illegal immigration continued unabated. In China, especially among those with lower education, they were still drawn by the allure of Europe and North America, with the promise of much higher wages than at home, despite the high risks. Compared to those who smuggled people just for money, Sister Ping was considered a passionate smuggler. Not only did she have a high success rate, but she also had mechanisms to reassure her clients. If one attempt to cross the border failed, they could change routes and try illegally immigrating again. In the worst-case scenario, like an accident at sea or sudden death due to illness, the bodies would still be thrown overboard. However, Sister Ping would refund all the fees, and provide additional compensation to the smuggled person's family in China. This approach not only garnered positive feedback from clients, but also helped Sister Ping evade the immigration police's pursuit. Even if caught, these immigrants were very resolute, refusing to reveal anything about Sister Ping to the police. Sister Ping's business just grew and grew. A few years later, she could afford to live in New York City. She even became the leading figure in human smuggling along the entire east coast of the U.S., earning her the title of the Smuggling Queen. From the start, the Fuck Ching gang, primarily made up of Fujianese, had a close relationship with Sister Ping's business. They not only helped with transporting smuggled people, collecting debts, and taking smuggling fees, but they also served as enforcers for her pawn shops and underground casinos. Of course, they also profited from these activities, with the gang's share reaching up to 60%. With the backing of this criminal organization, Sister Ping's business operations became more secure. Money flowed in like water. Despite her business thriving to such an extent, Sister Ping still adhered to certain operational principles. Each smuggling batch was limited to under 10 people, and compared to other human smugglers, her routes were always more complex and longer, sometimes passing through Southeast Asia, South America, even Europe and Africa. Many people took over a year to reach the U.S. This allowed her to control and change routes at any time, significantly reducing the risk. However, as her business expanded and the number of smuggling trips increased, Sister Ping couldn't foresee that accidents could still happen. In January 1988, near the Niagara Falls by just a few hundred meters, U.S. Border Patrol discovered an overturned boat. Following the trail along the shore, they found the frozen body of a young woman. She was pregnant, thus one body, two lives. Police suspected this woman was trying to enter Canada first, then illegally immigrate into the U.S. But her boat unexpectedly capsized, and not knowing how to swim, she lost her life just moments away from achieving her American dream. The police found no identification on her, but did discover a piece of paper with scrawled handwriting. It included a New York phone number and the name of a Chinese man surnamed Zhang. Tracing the phone number, police found that the owner was Sister Ping's husband. Faced with police questioning, Mr. Zhang claimed he was just helping with reception in New York and knew nothing about illegal immigrants or anything similar. Clearly, his response was well rehearsed, unable to fool the police. The more they questioned, the more Mr. Zhang responded with obstinacy, providing no useful information. When they were at a deadlock, Sister Ping herself brought in a lawyer. After the first negotiation, she took responsibility for most of her husband's charges. In return, he received a 9-month suspended sentence. Although Sister Ping also got a 3-month suspended sentence, this leniency came with a price. At this point, Sister Ping had made a deal with the FBI, indirectly acting as an informant to provide information on the Fuck Ching gang for the next 5 years. Playing both sides allowed Sister Ping to continue her human smuggling operations safely. No government agency troubled her, her reputation grew, and the smuggling fee increased from $18,000 to $40,000 per person. On June 6, 1993, a day considered lucky by the Chinese turned into a nightmare for those trapped on the smuggling ship, the Gold Adventure. Among the 286 immigrants, 90 were from Fujian. After passing through Thailand and around Africa, they had been adrift at sea for 7 months before finally reaching New York City's coastline. The American dream was within reach, but to avoid the Coast Guard, they couldn't disembark yet. They were forced to huddle together in the stench of feces and urine without receiving any food or water. The captain, running out of patience, decided at 2 a.m. on June 6 to enter U.S. territorial waters. But due to poor visibility, the cargo ship ran aground on a shallow sandbar near Rockaway. The captain then climbed onto the deck, pointing towards the not-so-distant New York City, urging the illegal immigrants to jump into the sea and swim to shore. Over 200 people leapt into the water, frantically swimming towards land. The sight left the beach police stunned, only seeing a mass of people in the rough waves advancing like zombies attacking the city. Some immigrants too afraid to jump could only call for help, while others who couldn't swim were swept away by the currents. After several hours, with the cooperation of the New York police and the FBI, they managed to rescue the immigrants and bring them to shore. Due to many of the illegal immigrants not having passports, registration and information processing were impossible. Even the captain was unsure of how many people he had on board. In the following days, bodies of the illegal immigrants began washing ashore, causing panic throughout New York City. A month later, they managed to account for the illegal immigrants. They determined that 10 had drowned during the immigration attempt, 6 were missing without a trace, and the remaining 270 were detained. This immigration tragedy shook the entire country, raising questions about President Clinton's understanding and handling of the situation just over a year into his term. Under public pressure, the president addressed the Gold Adventure incident, stating that all illegal immigrants were detained in a prison in Pennsylvania. Previously, under U.S. immigration and asylum laws, anyone setting foot on American soil would immediately be detained, brought to court, and then apply for political asylum. This was also why the captain urged everyone to jump into the sea, disregarding all dangers to move forward. Among the more than 280 illegal immigrants, 2 were actually clients of Sister Ping. However, the reason no one was there to meet them in New York was because this ship wasn't operated by Sister Ping. But even though she wasn't the mastermind, she eventually faced legal consequences. Sister Ping recognized the danger of this incident, deciding to flee the U.S. A global manhunt for her was soon launched. In 1994, after returning to mainland China, Sister Ping was arrested for violating laws related to aiding illegal immigration. Due to the absence of an extradition treaty between China and the U.S., and through some connections, she was released quickly. She then lived in her hometown for the next 6 years. Sister Ping not only continued to use false identities to travel between Hong Kong and Fujian, but also engaged in import-export business, even opening a garment factory in Shenzhen. With the money she earned, she contributed significantly to her hometown by repairing roads, building homes for residents, establishing a nursing home for the elderly in the village, and constructing a boarding elementary school for the children. The old fishing village had completely transformed. Because of these actions, in the eyes of the villagers, Sister Ping was seen as a living bodhisattva. But the U.S. police didn't give up. Even after 6 years of Sister Ping's escape, they received information that her son would travel from Hong Kong to New York. Police were then stationed at the airport to monitor. Hong Kong police noticed a short-haired, plump woman coming to say goodbye to her son, dressed simply with a kind smile, very different from the portrait on the wanted poster. 40 Hong Kong police officers surrounded her, and the police captain approached, requesting her to show her ID. After a moment of panic, Sister Ping realized it was the end and chose to surrender without resistance. The police later found 3 fake passports with different nationalities, each with different names and birth dates, but all looking very authentic. Sister Ping could have successfully evaded her charges forever, but her weakness, her son, led to her capture. The U.S. and Hong Kong could execute extradition, but the full legal process took 3 years. By July 2003, the chief executive of Hong Kong signed a special administrative order for her. Finally, she was extradited to the U.S. for trial, 9 years after the horrific incident on the Gold Adventure. Initially, U.S. police charged her with 7 serious offenses, including murder, using unsafe maritime vehicles, transporting illegal immigrants, and even operating an illegal casino for money laundering. If all were accurate, she would certainly face life imprisonment. However, these charges against Sister Ping were met with fierce public opposition. Most of these were people who had benefited from Yung Kuiping's illegal immigration routes. Many had been granted asylum and legal residence through presidential amnesties. They were more grateful to Sister Ping than anyone, believing that she helped them achieve their American dream. Many signed petitions to the White House, each willing to serve a year in prison on behalf of Sister Ping to spare her from incarceration. But of course, that would never happen. Ultimately, the federal court in Manhattan, New York, determined that Yung Kuiping had conspired to smuggle, launder money, and extort illegal immigrants. 3 charges were proven in March 2006. She was sentenced to 35 years in prison. 8 years later, at the age of 65, Sister Ping passed away from stage 4 pancreatic cancer in a women's prison in Texas. Thousands of people voluntarily attended her funeral. Her life was full of contradictions, making it impossible to conclude exactly who she was. Story 5. In the fall of 2014, amidst the desolate frost-covered wilderness of Yellowknife, a city dubbed Canada's Aurora Paradise, a Japanese tourist named Itsumi Yashikubo vanished without a trace. The woman, known for her gentle, reserved, and polite demeanor, left behind neatly packed luggage in her hotel, a round-trip plane ticket, and then disappeared into the depths of the forest as if she had never existed. Initially, all theories pointed to an unfortunate accident during her quest to see the northern lights. An unprecedented large-scale search operation was launched, but just 4 days later, the search abruptly halted. Both the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, and the media fell eerily silent. Nearly a year later, when her remains were discovered, chilling questions began to surface. Did she willingly walk into that forest, never intending to return? Or was there an unseen force lurking in the northern darkness? In October 2014, at the Explorer Hotel in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, Canada, Japanese tourist Atsumi Yoshikubo had been staying for 5 days. On her scheduled checkout day, she neither checked out nor requested an extension. The front desk staff remembered her as an elegant female doctor, well-dressed, soft-spoken, and looking younger than her 45 years. Initially, the hotel wasn't overly concerned. Yellowknife, with its stunning landscapes and pleasant atmosphere, often saw guests extend their stays, especially during the off-season when rooms were available and the hotel had her credit card on file. But by October 27th, Atsumi was still absent. Housekeeping reported her room had a do not disturb sign for days. At this point, the hotel manager grew suspicious, fearing something had happened to her. Upon checking the room, they found no one. Her luggage was open, personal items still inside. The manager began calling her repeatedly while reviewing security footage. Though this incident occurred 11 years ago, the challenges of staying connected while traveling abroad remain a constant concern, much like today. Expensive roaming fees, weak phone signals, unstable Wi-Fi, and the often time-consuming process of buying a SIM card at the airport. Unable to reach Atsumi, the hotel contacted the travel agency in Toronto that had facilitated her booking. After several attempts, they finally connected with her family in Japan, discovering she hadn't returned home as planned. Security footage captured her last moments leaving the hotel on October 22nd with no record of her returning. The RCMP was notified and searched her room, finding her passport and return ticket in the safe. A missing person alert was immediately broadcast on the radio, and her photo was posted around Yellowknife. During the hotel room search, police found a souvenir mug featuring a forest and aurora design, along with a receipt from the Midnight Sun shop dated October 19th. They traced this lead to the store, where an employee vividly recalled the petite woman in a pink puffy jacket and matching hat, looking stylish and eye-catching. She had asked if the mug was microwave safe, intending to use it back in Japan. Additionally, after reviewing the town's surveillance cameras, police pieced together Atsumi's movements, leaving the shop, strolling through the commercial district, and stopping at a tourism office to book an aurora tour. However, since it was the off-season and there weren't enough people to form a group, the staff suggested a private guide. The high cost disappointed her. She also declined other activities like dog sledding, ice fishing, or hiking, ultimately leaving without booking anything. Over the next 2 days, cameras captured Atsumi each morning in her pink jacket, camera in hand, taking photos around town, and returning to the hotel by afternoon. But after October 22nd, she never came back. Reports confirmed at least 2 witnesses saw her that day. The first witness, Carrie, a former RCMP officer, was driving on Ingram Trail around 11:30 a.m. when she spotted Atsumi walking alone. Her pink jacket stood out against the pristine wilderness, catching Carrie's attention. Initially, Carrie considered stopping to check on her, but seeing Atsumi's calm expression, warm clothing, and camera seemingly just out for a walk, she drove on without interrupting. The second witness, Sonia, a tour bus driver specializing in aurora trips, also saw Atsumi walking alone on the same road. Based on her direction, Sonia believed Atsumi might be heading toward Jackfish Lake, a popular spot for fishing and photography not too far away. These 2 became the last people to see her alive. Police confirmed Atsumi was still alive on October 22nd. But from that day until October 27th, when the hotel reported her missing, 5 days had passed. The weather, though early fall, had already turned snowy. Nighttime temperatures ranged from -5 degrees Celsius to -10 degrees Celsius, while daytime hovered around 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. For someone without survival experience, food or water, getting lost in the forest for over 24 hours was extremely dangerous. The police launched a massive search operation. Helicopters, tracking dogs, and nearly the entire force were mobilized. Even local hunters joined in. The largest missing person search in northwest Canada's history had begun. News of the mysterious disappearance of a Japanese doctor in Canada spread rapidly, shocking both Japan and Canada. On October 30th, just 2 days after confirming Itsumi Yashikubo's disappearance, a reporter from the U.S. branch of Nikkei News flew to Yellowknife. Soon after, major Japanese newspapers like Asahi Shimbun and Yomiuri Shimbun sent teams to the scene. Canadian outlets such as CBC and CTV followed suit, dispatching reporters to the northern region. In a short time, Yellowknife, a town of fewer than 20,000 people, buzzed with activity. Reporters with cameras and interview teams accompanied by translators were everywhere. The hotel where Itsumi had stayed quickly ran out of rooms. Why did the Japanese take such intense interest in a single missing tourist? From their media's perspective, Itsumi's disappearance wasn't just another missing person case. She was a female doctor with beauty, education, and a promising future, a triple ideal archetype suddenly vanishing in a foreign land. This struck a chord of sorrow and captured immense public attention in Japan. Moreover, for many Japanese, Yellowknife is the Aurora Sanctuary, a must-visit destination. The auroras here are even tied to a mystical fertility energy. A disappearance beneath the radiant northern lights, for a people who believe in legends of hidden gods, stirred a deep, inexpressible fear. The Japanese have a profound spiritual connection to the aurora. In their folklore, the ethereal lights are traces of deities and wishes made beneath them come true. In the early 90s, an American TV series, Northern Exposure, titled Bak Kwak Fong Van in Japan, sparked a craze. The show followed a New York doctor working in Alaska. Despite its all-American production, the stunning snowy landscapes and American humor resonated with Japanese audiences. The aurora, featured in nearly every episode, became a symbol of romance and pure beauty. Later, anime reinforced the belief that seeing the aurora brings lifelong happiness, and children conceived beneath it would be healthy and beautiful. Many newlyweds chose Arctic honeymoons, hoping to create angels under the aurora. Travel agencies capitalized on this, offering aurora bedroom packages with glass ceilings. Whatever the reason, Japan's fascination with the aurora grew. Not just newlyweds, but singles sought aurora fate to find true love, while the elderly believed the mysterious lights could dispel illness and extend life. Frankly, even without legends, the aurora remains a breathtaking natural wonder. Its colors aren't just green, but also purple and red, depending on magnetic field strength, solar particle intensity, and light refraction. The aurora's appearance can even differ between the naked eye and photos, depending on exposure. Seeing it requires not just the right location, but also luck. Even in the Arctic, weeks might pass without a sighting, yet sometimes, in a single night, the aurora dances across the sky, creating an unforgettable spectacle. Statistics show Yellowknife offers 240 nights annually to view the aurora with the naked eye. Not only is its frequency exceptional, but its clarity is also world-class. NASA has even called Yellowknife the best aurora viewing town in the world. Alongside Whitehorse in Canada's Yukon, Yellowknife is considered one of the country's twin aurora gems. Thanks to this reputation, Yellowknife attracts around 120,000 tourists annually from across the globe, 6 times its permanent population. Of these, about 10% are visitors from Japan. Itsumi Yashikubo was one such pilgrim to this aurora haven. She chose late October for her trip, not peak tourist season, but a transitional time when longer nights increased the chances of seeing the northern lights. Additionally, the lakes hadn't fully frozen, allowing the aurora to reflect on the water, a spectacle unavailable in deep winter or early spring. Itsumi Yashikubo had likely prepared meticulously for this journey. During her layover in Toronto, she purchased a long pink puffy jacket and a matching warm hat. What she couldn't anticipate, however, was the low tourist turnout, which prevented her from joining aurora tours. As mentioned, seeing the aurora requires some luck. Though Yellowknife is an ideal spot, tourists often need guides, light hunters with deep local knowledge, especially indigenous experts. These guides rely on wind, clouds, moonlight, and stars to predict the aurora's movement. Thus, police theorize that Itsumi, unable to find a suitable tour and finding private guides too costly, decided to hunt for the aurora on her own. This might explain why she was seen walking toward a lake on the outskirts, a spot known for frequent aurora sightings. Perhaps she planned to wait for darkness to test her luck, but when the search team scoured the area around the lake, they found no trace of her. Beyond lay a vast primal forest, rarely visited except by local hunters. Searching for someone there was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Beyond the risk of getting lost, another danger loomed: black bears. In this region, bears outnumber people. Typically, these animals are docile, but if Itsumi inadvertently entered their territory, the consequences could be dire, especially since bears were storing fat for hibernation. Police and local volunteers repeatedly ventured into the forest to search. Meanwhile, reporters remaining in town heard a chilling legend from elderly Inuit, also known as Eskimo, community members. An elder shared with a journalist that the aurora represents the spirits of ancestors and the deceased dancing in the night sky. If you listen closely, you might hear a faint click-clack, the sound of spirits playing soccer with human skulls. Inuit children are warned from a young age not to whistle while watching the aurora, as the sound could make the growing brighter until they form a rope that snatches the child's soul away. Some Yukon tribes believe the aurora embodies the spirits of those who died with unresolved grievances, wandering forests or deserts to find a replacement. Staring into the mesmerizing glow could enchant you, leading to disorientation, getting lost, or falling into an abyss without a trace. Though it sounds far-fetched, Japanese reporters couldn't help but shudder after hearing the tale. To them, wasn't this the hidden gods? In Japanese mythology, hidden gods refer to those taken by deities. Everything has a spirit, and gods inhabit a separate realm, divided by magical barriers. Anyone summoned or who stumbles into that world vanishes from the mortal plane, leaving no trace. Itsumi Yashikubo's disappearance seemed to mirror every detail of the hidden god's legend, except this time the guiding spirit hailed from Canada. Naturally, the police dismissed spiritual explanations, focusing on practical scenarios. Itsumi got lost in the forest, fell into the lake, or was attacked by a bear. All bleak possibilities, but a more sinister theory emerged. She might have encountered foul play. From the start, police hadn't ruled out abduction. In Japan, many hidden gods cases involve criminal acts. Yellowknife is generally peaceful, but recent years saw a spike in alcohol and drug addiction among local youth, particularly indigenous individuals. Theft, brawls, street racing, and emerging criminal gangs were on the rise. Many hunters here own guns, and police struggled with their readiness to shoot over trivial disputes. Men often turned to violence, alcohol, and drugs, while women became victims. 2 years prior, police had dismantled a human trafficking ring targeting indigenous girls, who were taken to larger cities and forced into prostitution. These victims often lacked identification and had limited education, making them easy targets for criminals. Though Itsumi wasn't indigenous, her petite frame and facial features bore some resemblance to local women. If someone saw her walking alone, they might have mistaken her for a runaway and abducted her. If true, finding her would be more challenging than ever. As rumors spread and the search spanned far and wide, answers remained elusive. Yet, on November 4th, just 4 days after the massive search officially began, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, abruptly announced its suspension. At the subsequent press conference, a police spokesperson revealed they had found a letter in Itsumi's hotel room addressed to a friend in Japan. Based on the letter's contents and their investigation into Itsumi's background in Japan, the police concluded she had intentionally ventured into the wilderness outside Yellowknife with the purpose of voluntarily becoming a missing person. The phrase voluntarily becoming a missing person left both Japanese and Canadian media baffled. The police stated that Itsumi had come to Yellowknife with a premeditated plan to disappear into the wilderness, ensuring no one could find her. They declined to disclose the letter's details, citing privacy concerns, but affirmed she had expressed a clear intent to vanish and erase her tracks. Many, however, didn't buy this conclusion. If Itsumi had written the letter and disappeared in Tokyo, it might suggest she wanted to escape her current life and start anew elsewhere. But for a lone woman to leave the city and step into a frigid wilderness, the outcome seemed singular. Voluntarily becoming a missing person sounded like a euphemism for ending her life. Japan's Fuji TV interviewed Itsumi's brother, who revealed that after her disappearance, Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs contacted the family, confirming Itsumi had written a letter to a female friend hinting at ending her life in Canada. However, he had never read its full contents, as Itsumi had been estranged from the family for years. Still, he disagreed with the police's conclusion. If she had truly planned this, why buy a round-trip ticket? And why purchase souvenirs for friends, even asking the shop clerk if they could be brought back to Japan? The last person to see Itsumi, driver Carrie, also raised doubts. After learning of the disappearance, Carrie deeply regretted not overcoming her social anxiety to stop and offer her a ride. As a former RCMP officer, Carrie recalled that Itsumi looked healthy and in good spirits that day, not like someone with dark intentions. Even if Itsumi had such intentions, a single letter shouldn't rule out abduction or trafficking. Such a hasty conclusion seemed reckless and irresponsible. This sparked another theory. The early end to the investigation might have been to protect the upcoming Aurora tourism season. Whether Itsumi got lost, was attacked by a bear, or was abducted, any of these scenarios could make tourists view Yellowknife as unsafe, prompting them to choose other destinations. But if the cause was her choice to leave the world, the impact on tourism would be minimal. In fact, that year, local tourism wasn't harmed. It even saw an uptick, fueled by hidden gods rumors. Many Japanese visited Yellowknife out of curiosity to chase the mystical, but authorities worried this could backfire, turning the area into a sanctuary for those wanting to disappear. Hence, they opted for the vague phrasing of voluntarily becoming a missing person. Meanwhile, volunteers, including Carrie, continued searching the outskirts forests until a major blizzard swept through, erasing all traces and forcing them to time past until September 2015, when a hiking couple discovered fabric scraps and what appeared to be human bones in a dense forest north of Yellowknife, a place rarely visited. Terrified, they immediately alerted the police. Authorities determined the remains belonged to a young woman, but the body had been heavily scavenged by wildlife and decomposed, leaving only scattered fragments, making the cause of death indeterminable. However, after reconstructing the fabric remnants, they found the color matched the pink puffy jacket Itsumi Yashikubo was wearing when she disappeared. The RCMP then traveled to Japan to collect DNA samples from Itsumi's father and brother for identification. Finally, in April 2016, police officially confirmed the remains were Itsumi Yashikubo's, the woman who had vanished earlier. Her cause of death was attributed to an accident, possibly getting lost in the forest and succumbing to hypothermia or an attack by a bear. According to police, the site where the remains were found was less than 5 kilometers from the lakeside road where Itsumi was last seen, within the area the search team had covered. Given her bright clothing, spotting her in the forest shouldn't have been difficult. This only deepened the mystery of her fate. Could an unseen force truly have spirited her away? Sadly, that secret may remain buried forever in Yellowknife's dense wilderness. In 2017, Canada's CBC produced a documentary titled Missing Tourist. Reporters traveled to Japan to interview Itsumi's brother, former colleagues, teachers, patients, and other acquaintances, hoping to shed light on her death. However, what they uncovered revealed a hidden chapter of her life. Itsumi Yashikubo was born in Yudo, Kumamoto Prefecture, into a wealthy family. Her father owned a private hospital and, given her background, expected his children to pursue medicine to inherit the family legacy. A high school teacher recalled Itsumi as a quiet, introspective, and diligent student, driven to pass medical school entrance exams to honor her parents. She succeeded, gaining admission to a medical school in Kumamoto. Initially, she aimed to become a surgeon, but later switched to psychology. After earning her license as a psychiatrist, she returned to work at her father's hospital. Her father, however, was disappointed, believing only surgery qualified one as a real doctor. Still, he gave her a private office on the hospital's 4th floor. Itsumi was a skilled doctor with deep empathy and a gentle demeanor, earning her patients' admiration. Some even drove hours for her treatment. Colleagues adored her, describing her as both beautiful and kind. She often brought back gifts from her travels, fostering strong relationships. To many, she embodied the ideal successful woman, a stable career, high income, and frequent international trips. But a turning point came when she abandoned everything to move to Tokyo alone, severing ties with her conservative father. Why Tokyo? Her brother speculated it might have been for a man. Despite her outwardly reserved nature, Itsumi had a passionate side. She loved rock music and was an ardent fan of a band's lead singer. She moved to Tokyo to pursue her idol, and they were together for several years. With her boyfriend's income from performances being unstable, Itsumi covered most living expenses, but their relationship was fraught with petty arguments. Meanwhile, Tokyo's cutthroat competition drained her. She initially worked at a large hospital, but, ostracized by internal cliques, was forced to resign. She then took a job at a suburban hospital, but the hours-long commute exhausted her further. Eventually, she could only do charitable in-home therapy, treating patients unable to leave their homes, significantly reducing her income. A struggling life, stalled career, and turbulent romance pushed Itsumi into depression. Some wondered, as a psychiatrist, how could she succumb to depression? But psychiatrists are among the professions with the highest depression rates. Beyond work stress, they absorb patients' negative energy like sponges when treating severe mental health issues. As the saying goes, when you gaze into the abyss gazes back. Psychiatrists constantly teeter on that edge, where a single misstep can lead to a fall. Itsumi fell into the very abyss, a healer unable to heal herself. During this time, her brother and friends urged her to return home, but she refused, unwilling to be seen as a failure, a woman in her 40s returning empty-handed after leaving for the big city. Maintaining her pride was only part of it. More crucially, she couldn't face the father she'd been estranged from for years. Amid this inner turmoil and external pressure, Itsumi booked a flight to Yellowknife, Canada, hoping to see the aurora she'd always dreamed of before ending her life. Perhaps initially the thought was just a flicker. She hadn't fully committed, hence the round-trip ticket and souvenirs for friends. But once lost in the forest, gazing at the aurora, dancing like a magical ballet, she may have been mesmerized by nature's force, making her suppressed desire for release clearer than ever. She might have thought dissolving into the vast wilderness was a beautiful way to go. So she abandoned calling for help, abandoned saving herself, leading to her tragic end. Of course, these are mere speculations. No one can know for sure. We often hear advice like, if you're depressed, go for a walk. Fresh air helps. But few realize that solitary trips can sometimes worsen the condition, not heal it. Professor Simon Hatcher, a psychiatry expert at the University of Ottawa, said in an interview, "Some people wander the wilderness for extended periods to escape reality, subconsciously testing themselves against death. In desolate, isolated spaces, feelings of detachment and suppression grow, amplified by harsh weather. This can intensify the desire to give up, to keep walking forever, until life ends, without someone to pull them back, as those who passed Itsumi failed to stop and help. It's like the last life buoy being swept away from a drowning person. Her unexplained departure may simply be a tragedy of untreated depression. In Miyazaki's animated film, Chihiro returns to the human world, thanks to Haku and Kiyonashi. In real life, those lost in the dark inner world also need professional help and the loving embrace of family or friends to escape their own hidden gods. Itsumi Yashikubo's mysterious disappearance and death shocked many, not just for its eerie circumstances, a Japanese psychiatrist vanishing silently in Canada's wilderness, but also for raising deeper questions about mental health, modern loneliness, and the limits of empathy. This story prompts reflection. Even those who help others, like psychiatrists, can be silently consumed by their own pain. Family pressures, career stress, unfulfilled love, and a lack of mental health support drove her to the edge. Itsumi's story is a haunting wake-up call. Beneath a seemingly strong exterior may lie unseen loneliness and fear. In an increasingly modern society, people can feel more isolated in a crowd. Timely care, listening, and support might be the lifebuoy for struggling souls like Itsumi Yashikubo. And so, this mysterious case remains unsolved. Story 6. In April 2016, all German media turned their attention to a case that sent shockwaves through the public. A house of horrors had reportedly been uncovered just days earlier. Inside, investigators found evidence that women had been abused before being incinerated in a wood stove, where traces of DNA were discovered. The homeowners, who presented themselves to neighbors as siblings, were Angelica and Wilfried Wagner, one deemed highly intelligent, even psychopathic by experts, the other intellectually disabled, with the IQ of a child. What had happened inside this house? How horrific was it? How many women had fallen into the couple's clutches? And more crucially, how many had met their end in that wood stove? This case unfolds in a rural area tucked away in western Germany, in the province of Westphalia, Leipzig. Höxter, a small town so quaint you could traverse its center in the blink of an eye. Surrounding Höxter are vast fields and rolling hills, steeped in solitude. Young people in Höxter often seek the vibrancy of nearby cities like Anhof, Bayfield, or Dortmund on weekends, as there's little in Höxter to hold their interest. Just beyond Höxter, nestled even deeper in that stillness, lies Bosborn, a village so tiny you've likely never heard of it. More isolated than Huxter, it's home to just a few hundred residents. So obscure is Bosbourne that, when the horrific case we're about to explore broke, it was dubbed the Huxter House of Horrors, overshadowing the existence of poor Bosbourne entirely. But that illusion of peace shattered on a fateful April day. On April 27, 2016, a house in Bosbourne was suddenly swarmed by investigators. Police cars screeched to a halt out front, sirens blaring. Men hurriedly set up barricades and large tarps, concealing the yard. Neighbors watched in shock, unable to fathom what was happening. What had disrupted Bosbourne's quiet so drastically? As the door of the house in Bosbourne creaked open under the scrutiny of the law, a horrifying, sinister truth emerged. This was no ordinary home. It was a true house of horrors. A living hell where innocent women had endured unimaginable suffering. Stepping inside revealed a filthy, damp space with traces of captivity and abuse everywhere. In the frigid bathroom, investigators were horrified to find dried blood mixed with excrement, flakes of skin, and clumps of brittle hair. Even more chilling, human DNA was detected in the chimney, a gruesome remnant of bodies cruelly burned. Deeper within, behind crumbling walls, a dark basement came into view, undoubtedly the site where victims were held and tortured. Investigators worked tirelessly, meticulously sealing every piece of evidence, piecing together the horrific fragments of truth. Meanwhile, the two inhabitants of this house, who had lived there for a decade, posing as siblings, were arrested. Over those 10 years, Wilfried and Angelica had lured countless women into their home. For 10 long years, muffled cries for help and silent sobs in the night echoed from this house. Unheard, unanswered, with no one coming to their rescue. But what's astonishing is how German investigators managed to uncover this house of horrors in the first place. Because based on what they found inside, many women had been held captive here. And the most terrifying part, many of them had met a tragic end within these walls. To unravel the mystery of how investigators discovered this house of horrors, let's rewind 5 days before that fateful moment. On that day, Angelica set out with one of their final victims, a woman named Suzanne. Suzanne had been trapped in that earthly hell since February. It all began innocently, like many love stories, when Suzanne stumbled upon a small dating ad in a local newspaper. The man, Wilfried, presented himself as someone seeking love, the owner of a beautiful home in Bosbourne. He even included a small photo, a man lounging on a sofa, shoulder-length hair, with eyes described as alluring. You might laugh at the image or find it entirely unappealing. Yet, strangely, that seemingly harmless photo became the bait that lured most of Wilfried and Angelica's victims. Perhaps the dating scene in Bosbourne was so barren that Wilfried became the most attractive man within miles. Throughout February, Susan still told friends about the man she met through that ad. But then one day she vanished. All attempts to reach her failed. Her phone went unanswered, messages ignored. Worried friends visited her apartment, knocking repeatedly with no response. Suzanne, a divorced woman with an active social life, had disappeared without a trace, leaving everyone baffled. The grim reality was that Suzanne's nightmare began the moment she set foot in Bosbourne to visit Wilfried's home, where he claimed to live with his sister, Angelica. Now that we've glimpsed how Susan fell into this earthly hell, we'll gradually uncover the cruel methods of Wilfried and Angelica. By the time Suzanne became a victim, they had mastered their process of capturing and tormenting people. Like the twisted law of serial killers, each successful crime fueled their grotesque confidence. The moment the door of the House of Horrors closed behind Suzanne, a brutal blow extinguished her resistance. When she awoke, she found herself chained in the cold darkness of the basement. Any memory of Wilfried's feigned kindness from their first date dissolved like a dream. From that moment, a horrifying brainwashing process began. Wilfried and Angelica seemed to wield a dark mastery in breaking their victims' spirits, ensuring escape was unthinkable. Their method was built on extreme suffering. They spared no cruelty, electric pliers buzzing, scalding water, hair shaved off in humiliating degradation, days of starvation to the point of collapse. Even when a woman in that house fully submitted, her will to resist shattered, Wilfried and Angelica didn't relent. Susan became a hollow shell, her eyes vacant, reduced to an obedient husk. Wilfried abused her mercilessly, turning her into a mere puppet. The torment was so severe that Susan was even seen shopping with Wilfried and Angelica, her head shaved, her body covered in wounds. And no one called for help. By then, Susan was utterly broken, devoid of any desire to escape. This earthly hell persisted until April 21st, when her body finally gave out. Angelica realized another corpse would create too many complications. The woman who posed as a sister to the world, but was actually Wilfred's wife, decided to return Suzanne to her apartment, where she had vanished nearly 3 months earlier so she could die there. It would save time compared to their usual method, freezing the body, dismembering it, and burning it in the stove, a process too complex when they had more important things to do. So Angelica brazenly escorted a frail Suzanne out of the house in full view of neighbors. Yet no one suspected a thing. No one called the police despite witnessing the harrowing scene. Suzanne, utterly exhausted, was placed in the passenger seat. Honestly, she was barely alive at that point. Only a miracle could have saved her. She could no longer endure the suffering. Perhaps she even longed for release. But during the drive, an unexpected mishap occurred. Angelica's car broke down. A dire situation, as a mere glance at Susan made it clear she was dying. Explaining her condition as a simple traffic accident would be nearly impossible. In that critical moment, Angelica faced a tough decision. The car was a valuable asset, and with their strained finances, losing it would be a heavy blow. But seeing Suzanne's near-death state, Angelica knew there was no time to hesitate. She took a gamble. Stepping out of the stalled car on the roadside, she approached the nearest house, staging a clumsy act. She told the homeowner her car broke down while taking a friend to the hospital, and urgently requested they call an ambulance. The wail of sirens pierced the rural silence. Emergency responders arrived swiftly, and the doctor, with a professional eye, immediately recognized that the motionless woman in the passenger seat was no ordinary patient. The wounds on her body weren't from a kitchen mishap. They were marks of brutal abuse, of days of starvation to the point of collapse. The doctor was horrified to note that Susan appeared to have been kept in one position for weeks, perhaps months. The skin around her tailbone, under pressure from sitting, had necrotized, emitting a putrid stench that filled the car. Suzanne was rushed to the nearest hospital in critical condition. Her heart, exhausted from relentless suffering, gave way. She slipped into a deep coma and never awoke. 24 hours later, on April 22nd, Suzanne took her final breath. Suzanne's death under such unusual circumstances raised alarm among the doctors. They immediately notified the authorities. Just 5 days after that fateful car breakdown, police stormed Wilfred and Angelica's house, uncovering a true den of horrors, a place where darkness and crime had reigned for a decade. Over 12,000 video and audio files were recovered, cruelly documenting what had transpired within those cold walls for years. To understand what drove Wilfred and Angelica down this horrific path, we must trace back through time, seeking the first pieces of this dark puzzle. The couple bore the surname Wagner. Wilfred Wagner, born in 1970, was dealt a harsh fate from birth. Marked by an intellectual disability with an IQ of just 59, a score classified as intellectually impaired in modern society. It may sound harsh, but Wilfred's sluggishness was undeniable, evident in his academic performance to the extent that he was sent to a special education facility to learn the basics: reading, writing, arithmetic, and logical thinking. With such a low IQ, Wilfred struggled immensely to understand social relationships. Making friends felt like an insurmountable challenge. As a result, he sought companionship in other beings' dogs. He enrolled in a dog training course, but his patience had its limits. He didn't attend all the sessions and eventually dropped out, spending much of his time helping his mother and stepfather at the family farm. Later, he landed a menial job as a mechanic in a car garage. Despite his low IQ, Wilfred was a functioning adult, capable of manual labor. He could use his hands and follow orders. As long as he was told what to do, things went smoothly. Unfortunately, no employer seemed patient enough to train someone like Wilfred, and time after time, he was fired. Life's hardships forced him to rely on social welfare to survive. In the early 1990s, welfare services secured him a position in the military, but sadly, he wasn't deployed as a true soldier, more like a sacrificial pawn. His brief military stint ended in 1994. Wilfred returned to his hometown, carrying invisible scars in his psyche, and married a woman history seems to have forgotten. Her story, however, resurfaced painfully when the House of Horrors was uncovered nearly 20 years later. This woman, whom we'll call Emma, met Wilfred through small newspaper ads, the very method he'd used to ensnare other victims. At the time, Wilfred still had a youthful charm and an appealing appearance, making it easy to woo young women yearning for love. Emma quickly fell for him, even agreeing to marry him after a brief courtship. This hasty decision met with apprehension from Emma's family, who had an ominous feeling about the rushed marriage. They were right. Emma was about to step into an earthly hell, becoming a bloody lesson that would refine Wilfred's cruel methods of torment in the years to come. The earliest signs of his malice emerged in their married life. A single overcooked meal could ignite Wilfred's rage. He'd unleash a torrent of vicious insults, berating Emma as a useless wife who couldn't fulfill her duties. Then, brutal beatings would follow. Before family dinners or outings, Wilfred would use a hairdryer to heat Emma's bruised arms, a vile act to conceal the marks of abuse. Over months of torment, Emma's spirit crumbled. She began to believe no one could help her, even though her family was ready to save her. Wilfred relentlessly planted toxic lies in her mind, convincing her he was the only one who could care for her, that she wouldn't survive a night outside. Even in the car, Emma found no peace. A minor speeding infraction would result in Wilfred pinching her until she bled. To deepen the humiliation of his wretched wife, Wilfred brazenly invited Michaela, his ex-lover from before his military days, to live with them. His relationship with Michaela hadn't lasted, but now he wanted to use her as a tool to torment Emma. Both Wilfred and Michaela took pleasure in degrading and humiliating Emma, turning her life into an endless cycle of suffering. In the hell Emma endured, depravity and cruelty knew no bounds. They openly engaged in intimacy in front of her, reducing her to an inanimate object, forcing her into degrading acts. Emma was often chained by the neck like an animal, starved until her body was a skeletal shell. Wilfred and Michaela stripped her of all humanity, turning her into an object to fulfill their sick desires whenever they pleased. Emma didn't escape, not just because her spirit was utterly broken, but because of Wilfred's vicious threats. He instilled terror in her mind, warning that if she dared flee or speak out, he'd hunt down and exact revenge on her family, even if it cost him his life or years in prison. But thankfully, familial love triumphed over cruelty. Emma's parents, increasingly worried by her lack of contact, sought her out at Wilfred's house of hell. They rescued her from her excruciating suffering and filed a complaint. Wilfred and Michaela were charged with violence and abuse. However, the depraved pair offered a shameless defense, claiming they had to destroy Emma's spirit and harm her, because she couldn't handle her husband seeing other women. Tragically, this absurd excuse nearly succeeded, as domestic violence wasn't yet taken seriously by society at the time, and husbands were seen as having every right over their wives. Fortunately, a brave neighbor testified at the trial, recounting the horrific sight of Wilfred, forcing Emma to kneel on all fours and declare, "I am your servant." This testimony crossed the judge's threshold of tolerance. Deeming it an act of degradation, the judge sentenced Wilfred to 2 years and 9 months in prison, while Michaela received a 1-year suspended sentence. After the trial, the two parted ways. Wilfred was released, but what he had done to Emma seemed to have etched itself into his psyche. He had enjoyed the ability to abuse, humiliate, and beat her at will. Those brutal acts gave him sensations he'd never experienced before. So after his release, he began searching for a new woman, either to repeat his depraved acts or to assist him in abusing others. That woman was Angelica, whom he met through small newspaper ads in 1999. Angelica Wagner, also born in 1970, shared a commonality with Wilfred. She too grew up on a farm, with parents who were farmers. She had a brother, but he plays no role in this dark tale. Unlike Wilfred, however, Angelica was intelligent, remarkably so. Psychologists later marveled at her unusually high IQ. Angelica excelled in sharp problem-solving, rapid learning, and analytical thinking. Her IQ was estimated at around 120, an astonishing figure, comparable to the notorious serial killer Ted Bundy. One of the most intelligent psychopaths of the past 50 years, Angelica possessed a similar intellect. So, brace yourself for what's to come. As a child, Angelica was described as kind, but sadly she had few friends. Her peers were unkind, mocking her ugly and unattractive appearance. Angelica struggled with being overweight, and the bob haircut her mother gave her at home only made her feel more out of place, completely ostracized by her classmates. Disinterested in academics, Angelica left school early and became a gardener. At least plants wouldn't tell her she was ugly, or her hairstyle was outdated. During this time, she began harboring negative emotions, a simmering resentment toward those around her, especially the beautiful girls she'd pass on the street. After her father's death, her mother grew more demanding, ordering Angelica to quickly find a husband, leave home, start a family, and meet her aging mother's future needs. Angelica complied. She started responding to small dating ads in the newspaper, and fate led her to Wilfried, a man fresh out of prison after a messy divorce, at least according to his ad. They met, and things progressed alarmingly well. For the first time, Angelica had a romantic relationship. She couldn't wait any longer. She finally had someone. Angelica, a woman who had never tasted true love, was ready to do anything to keep Wilfried by her side. She gave him all her meager savings, a considerable sum. Wilfried, ever quick to sniff out money, promptly proposed, and she accepted. Just 8 weeks after their fateful meeting, Wilfried and Angelica were married. The Wagner couple, two deeply scarred individuals with twisted desires, was born, poised to unleash terror across Germany. And so the years of horror began. Indeed, Wilfried and Angelica became a pair at a dizzying pace. We have Wilfried, a somewhat dim-witted man, desperate for a woman in his life to vent his anger and satisfy his dark desires. On the other hand, Angelica, an intelligent woman who, tragically, had never been truly loved, blindly followed her husband's every word. She endured his beatings, convincing herself it was normal in a relationship. Wilfried had his own perverse habits. Whenever Angelica dared to defy him, or fail to comply, he'd smother her under thick blankets to muffle her screams. Their dilapidated house amplified every sound. Trapped beneath layers of fabric, Angelica endured relentless blows. With sick pleasure, Wilfried would pour boiling water on his wife, already suffering in her hell beneath the blankets. Half suffocating in excruciating pain, Angelica often lost consciousness. Wilfried and Angelica's married life was fraught with hardship from the start. The house they bought was so run down that the couple decided to divorce to separately take on loans for repairs, avoiding excessive joint debt under Germany's common property marriage laws. In reality, the repairs were never done, yet Wilfried and Angelica continued living together in that decrepit house. No heating, damp, and riddled with mold. Unable to afford proper renovations, the couple devised a brilliant idea. Respond to small newspaper ads to scam gullible women, siphoning their savings into a shared bank account. But with their clumsy and thoughtless nature, Wilfried and Angelica's scams quickly hit a dead end. Often, Angelica would flip through ad pages for Wilfried to select prey. He didn't just target young German women, but also women from the Czech Republic. This is why today, it's suspected that the true number of their victims may be far higher than officially recorded. Women whose existence was already unnoticed may have vanished without a trace upon entering the Wagner siblings' home. To avoid raising suspicion, the cunning pair always posed as siblings living with the young women they targeted. Angelica acted as the driver, chauffeuring Wilfried to dates since he didn't even have a driver's license. In 2008, according to official reports, the Wagner couple claimed their first victim. A woman named Anna Marie fell into Wilfried's romantic trap. She was their first official victim, and their methods were still unrefined. Wilfried demonstrated his ability to manipulate and mentally subdue women through violence. He quickly gained access to Anna's bank account, often showing up at her home and helping himself to food from her fridge without asking. Fortunately for Anna Marie, she wasn't confined in the couple's house at that time. She soon sensed something strange and abnormal about Wilfried and Angelica. After a year in a violently abusive relationship, Anna's brother, at her request, threatened Wilfried with legal action if he dared come near her again. Thus, Anna Marie survived her harrowing encounter with the Wagner couple, who continued to hunt for new prey through small newspaper ads. Thanks to Anna's savings and bank account, Wilfried and Angelica lived comfortably for a year. Soon after letting their first prey slip away, they began searching for a new victim. It didn't take long to find another, though we know little about her as her identity is protected by law. We only know that Wilfried successfully manipulated her, swindling 15,000 euros, approximately $16,500 at the time. This abusive relationship ended only when the woman was hospitalized after a severe illness. Wilfried and Angelica quickly cast their net again in the pages of old newspapers. This time, a woman named Crystal took the bait. In a saccharine dating ad, Wilfried painted himself as a kind, affectionate man seeking a lasting relationship. It sounded too good to be true, hardly a hint of the horrors awaiting her. This time, the sinister couple wasted no time. Wilfried feigned love for Crystal, promising her the world and inviting her to move into his beautiful house in Bosseborn, which he claimed he'd renovate with his sister, Angelica. The first 3 weeks passed with an eerie calm. Crystal wondered if she'd made the right choice, but Wilfried seemed incredibly kind and attentive. All three slept in the cramped living rooms due to lack of space, but at least they were together. Crystal slowly adjusted to the couple's odd lifestyle. They slept all day and stayed awake at night. The house was never cleaned, everything was filthy, and the only source of heat was a single ancient electric stove, the kind you'd find in rundown apartments, guzzling electricity but barely warming the room. Crystal shivered constantly and began telling Wilfried she wanted to leave. She had contributed to the household expenses, but after 3 weeks in this squalor, nothing had improved. Wilfried and Angelica's promises of renovations remained empty words. That's when her hellish captivity began. To keep Crystal from panicking, Wilfried and Angelica reassured her she was free to leave whenever she wanted, except the door was locked and she no longer had her keys, identification, or money. Crystal realized she had nowhere to go and was completely cut off from the outside world. The trap had snapped shut and brutal abuse began. To break her spirit and eliminate any thought of escape, the cruel couple forbade her from bathing, ordering her to clean herself like a cat by licking her body, a humiliating act Crystal was forced to obey under Wilfried's command. She was also barred from using the toilet normally. Wilfried simply handed her a filthy sanitary tray. Angelica would maliciously douse Crystal with a bucket of scalding water in the middle of the night, ensuring she couldn't sleep peacefully. For 3 months, Crystal endured this hell. She no longer had the strength or will to attempt escape. Overwhelmed by shame over her condition and the horrific filth covering her body, Crystal suffered through those hellish months until the day Wilfried and Angelica forced her to sign a document stating her injuries were accidental, absolving the Wagner couple of responsibility. Then they drove her to the nearest train station, handed back her keys and ID, and let her board a train home. The harsh reality was that Crystal was released primarily because she no longer held any appeal for Wilfried. He even found her repulsive, so he simply wanted to be rid of her. Crystal, scarred physically and emotionally, didn't dare file a complaint. She lived in seclusion at home, constantly fearing the might return, and ashamed for having trusted a simple newspaper ad. This gentle failure taught the Wagner couple 2 key lessons. First, no woman would willingly stay in that filthy, dilapidated house, so they had to confine and break their victims from the start. Second, if Wilfried wanted to torment and abuse his victims for months, hygiene was crucial. These were the 2 points Wilfried and Angelica aimed to improve when Anika arrived. In mid-2013, a young woman named Anika entered their home. She quickly fell for Wilfried, though she found Angelica somewhat strange. Another whirlwind wedding took place on October 18, 2013. Everything happened at breakneck speed. It's unclear what sweet words Wilfried whispered to these women, or what strange charisma he possessed, but he consistently succeeded in marrying them mere weeks after meeting. Anika's family didn't even know about her marriage until her mother tried to contact her. All she received was a voicemail from Anika, introducing Wilfried Wagner as her husband. Eventually, Anika called back, reassuring her mother everything was fine, and Angelica even drove Anika to meet her mother. Anika's mother felt somewhat relieved seeing her daughter seemingly okay, unaware that by then, Anika was completely under control. That brief meeting would be the last time they saw each other. As mentioned, the sinister couple knew they had to swiftly break their victims' spirits, so Anika was soon locked in a freezing bathtub day and night. Angelica mercilessly turned on scalding water, drenching the young woman chained to the tub with no way to escape this hell. The bathroom windows had long been sealed shut, making nighttime escapes futile. Whenever Anika dared resist, Wilfried would storm in with a terrifying electric cable, dipping it into the icy water and pulling it out only after her desperate pleas. These brutal acts served one purpose: to keep Anika entirely under their control, though experts later concluded that Angelica and Wilfried genuinely enjoyed inflicting such pain. Horrific footage uncovered by investigators showed Anika weakening daily, barely able to speak, her eyes nearly unable to open, her body covered in burns from scalding water and electric shocks. A neighbor later testified to seeing Anika in the yard in such a pitiful state that she collapsed. Instead of helping her up, Angelica cruelly kicked her, forcing her back into the house of horrors. And no, if you're wondering, that neighbor didn't alert the authorities. 4 days later, on August 4th, Anika's heart stopped. For the first time, Angelica and Wilfried faced a corpse, and they panicked. They, in utter panic, to mask the increasingly foul odor, they hastily stuffed Anika into an old freezer in the house. Days passed in anxiety and fear as the couple hesitated to dispose of her body. Angelica even went shopping as usual. But upon returning, she realized the frozen Anika took up too much space in the cramped freezer. So a gruesome act followed. Angelica callously shoved Anika deeper inside and nonchalantly stacked frozen pizza boxes on top of her. "I'm not making this up," Angelica later confessed to placing frozen pizzas on Anika in the freezer. No one knows how long Anika remained in that icy grave. What's certain is that one dark night, the couple removed her from the freezer and began a ghastly task, dismembering her in the bathroom. Angelica later chillingly recounted feeling hotter than ever in the house, thanks to the fire burning day and night in the stove. To dispose of Anika permanently, her ashes were scattered far and wide. The couple drove around, casually dumping the remains into roadside fire pits. Meanwhile, Angelica continued texting Anika's mother, pretending to be her ill-fated daughter, assuring her everything was fine and not to worry. One detail nags at me. Anika died in August 2014, and the couple was arrested in April 2016. Who can believe that, in the long stretch from August 2014 to April 2016, no other women set foot in the House of Horrors in Bossaborn? To search for traces of other victims, we must return to the couple's arrest and the trial, a trial where justice seemed somewhat complicit. When investigators stormed the Wagner couple's home, Angelica and Wilfried showed no intent to flee. In fact, they seemed barely aware of what was happening. As mentioned earlier, investigators found DNA traces in the bathtub and wood stove. Even more horrifying, they uncovered chilling audio and video recordings, capturing Wilfried or Angelica gleefully inflicting excruciating pain on various women who had entered the house. Disturbingly, the identities of some of those victims remain a mystery to this day. On October 26, 2016, the Wagner couple's trial began. As we know, Angelica quickly confessed to all crimes in exchange for a promise from the German court to avoid a life sentence. Wilfried, with his low IQ, appeared utterly lost. He struggled to grasp what was happening, and experts concluded he didn't fully comprehend the crimes he'd committed or their consequences. Angelica, with her sharp intellect and lawyers' help, crafted a meticulously rehearsed defense. She portrayed herself as an abused, mistreated woman, a pitiful wife who only wanted to make her husband happy by finding other women through small ads. She tried to convince the court she never imagined Wilfried would do such horrific things to them, and had she known, she wouldn't have done it. When things spiraled out of control, she continued out of fear for her own safety. Sure, he occasionally tied up and beat them, but sometimes they deserved it for insulting him with harsh words or resisting. Investigators uncovered a staggering figure, 500 dating ads that the Wagner couple had placed in local and even international newspapers, all to lure unsuspecting women into their trap. 500 ads. Meanwhile, throughout this video, we've only covered 8 official victims and 2 brutal murders. That number is a mere fraction of the cruel web the Wagner couple spun across countless pages. Regarding Anika's murder, I can recount the horrific torture that unfolded behind closed doors in the Wagner couple's house, because Angelica herself penned a 45-page document meticulously detailing the suffering the young woman endured. According to Angelica, the purpose was to spare the German court a deeper investigation and save time. She shamelessly claimed Anika's death was a tragic accident, that Anika had tried to escape but slipped and hit her head on furniture. So, in Angelica's words, Anika's death wasn't their fault. The question of Angelica and Wilfried's responsibility in this shocking case was fiercely debated. How could things have escalated to such brutal acts? Psychiatric experts were called to evaluate the defendants' psychological profiles. Angelica was described as an exceptionally intelligent woman, but with mild autism, rendering her completely devoid of compassion for her victims. Like many psychopaths and serial killers, Angelica felt no remorse or empathy for the unfortunate women. Their screams, cries, and desperate pleas failed to thaw her icy heart. When a psychologist asked how mad she was, whether for instance she could have run a concentration camp during World War II, Angelica calmly replied, "Yes, and I'd have won a medal for it." Angelica was never portrayed as a victim in this horrific tale. She adhered to all of Wilfried's cruel rules during those dark years, willingly harming victims or even participating in their dismemberment. Experts traced her ruthlessness to her childhood. Angelica had endured relentless humiliation over her appearance, had no friends, and over time developed a deep-seated hatred for humanity, a rage she fully unleashed through Wilfrid's depravity. Without Angelica, there would have been no women shackled, handcuffed, or forced to relieve themselves in the cat litter trays. Wilfrid, on the other hand, was merely a fool. Experts concluded he had the IQ of a child, unable to discern right from wrong, and thus incapable of remorse. He likely would have been caught and convicted for domestic violence much sooner without Angelica. Surviving victims, upon seeing the familiar faces of the Wagner couple on national television, bravely came forward to testify at the trial, recounting the horrific months they endured. This was also how Anika's mother, who had lost contact with her daughter for so long, learned the painful truth. She recognized Wilfrid, the man her daughter had married, on the news. After 2 long years of complex legal proceedings, the Wagner couple's trial concluded on October 26, 2018. Angelica, then 49, was sentenced to 13 years in prison. Wilfrid, 48, received 11 years in a psychiatric facility. The prosecutor had adamantly pushed for life sentences for both, but the German court considered their psychological conditions to reduce the penalties, granting them a second chance in society despite their heinous crimes, abuse, extortion, and murder. Upon hearing the verdict, Angelica flashed a smile of smug satisfaction, having escaped a life sentence. Wilfrid, meanwhile, mumbled a rehearsed, emotionless statement. "I want to apologize to all my victims." A hollow apology from a man incapable of grasping others' suffering. Much of the German public expressed outrage at the lenient sentences. Many expected Wilfrid and Angelica to face the maximum penalty, life imprisonment, since, upon release, they'd still be relatively healthy and a potential danger to society. Will there be a second chapter to this horrific story? We'll only know in a few years, as Wilfrid is set to be released in 2028 at age 59, and Angelica in 2031 at age 62, despite experts confirming her as a woman with antisocial and violent tendencies. The story of the House of Horrors in Bosborn hasn't fully concluded. After the controversial trial, the tragic house was purchased by a man named Dave MacLeod for a shockingly low price, €5,000, approximately $5,500 at the time. Dave publicly declared he'd renovate the house to donate it to a housing association for single women. Authorities, perhaps still haunted by the case's gruesomeness, closely monitored this charitable project. Ironically, Dave MacLeod was later arrested for growing cannabis inside that very House of Horrors. And so, today's case comes to a close. The true number of the Wagner couple's victims may forever remain an unsolved mystery. Justice, after much debated sentences, seems to have closed the case file. No large-scale search was conducted to trace women from neighboring countries who may have entered the Wagner house. Women whose disappearances likely went unnoticed. As the rain falls and the night deepens, thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.